I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street. There's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe. Our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy.
We all know something is wrong. Very wrong. But most of us project our frustrations on puppets or front organizations, not the real perpetrators manipulating the strings from behind the scenes. Truth Talk News is a source to that understanding. Here you will find a vast catalog of information suppressed from history books and mass media. Here you will find a path of breadcrumbs that leads to understanding the truth and the powerful forces behind the scenes working to suppress it. All information reported on Truth Talk News and HowardNema.com is sourced and verifiable. For a library of additional links, books, articles, and videos, please take advantage of the abundance of information available at HowardNema.com. Truth Talk News and Howard Nema are fair use channels. Feel free to share and download all content. It is critical you take the initiative to confirm the information contained on these channels. Do the research. Find your own truth. There is only one truth. Seek and you will find it.
Time to expose these charlatans, the real puppet masters and unseen hands that rule over society, the Jesuit order and the papal bloodlines of the black nobility. Now, we're familiar with the 13 Illuminati family bloodline. That's the Astors, Bundys, Kennedys, Onassis, Reynolds, Russell, Van Dyne, Lee, Rockefeller, Rothschild, Freeman, DuPont, Krupp, McDonald's, Disney, and the Merovingian family, as well as the Royal British German crowned family. Now, what is the black nobility? The black nobility, or black aristocracy of Europe, of the Jesuits, nobilita nera, are Roman aristocratic families who sided with the papacy under Pope Pius after the Savoy family led an army of the Kingdom of Italy into Rome on September 20th, 1870, and overthrew the Pope and his papal states and took over the Quirinal Palace. And any nobles ennobled by the Pope prior to the 1929 Lateran Treaty is considered black nobility. So, for the next 59 years, the Pope confined himself to Vatican City to avoid the appearance of submission to the invading Italian army and state. So the aristocratic nobles and the senior members of that papal court who mourned the Pope's confinement for that 59 years earned the title of black nobility. So most of the members of the black nobility or papal bloodlines inherited their positions and can trace their family back to these times. So it's from these families in these papal bloodlines that usually the church's high-ranking clergy officials and popes are selected from. Now, what are the families of the black nobility or the papal bloodlines? There's CoNsPiRaCy, Borgia, Colonna, Catonic, Medici, Pamphili, Orsini, Aldo Brandini, Shigi, Conti, Este, Samaglia, and Pallavicini. All Italian, right? These are the real families that control the world and world events. The Bushes, the Kennedys, Onassis, the Trumps, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, they're all pawns of the black nobility. You know, y'all are welcome for this information too. So if my channel stop getting flags and strikes, I can start putting out some good shit. But hey, now the two most familiar names I'm sure y'all realized on this list of the black nobility or the black aristocracy was Medici and Borgia. Now, what's the importance of these two families to the black nobility? The House of Borgia. They recently made a Showtime series on it where Jeremy Irons played Pope Alexander. Now, the Borgias is an Italian
It's a war for control. The control of your mind and your body. Americans are traditionally independent, very hard to control. But the architects of the New World Order have ways to force you into submission. First, through a well-orchestrated agenda including health care, financial security, safety from crime, and environmental issues, the public will be coerced into accepting a national identification card. It will be disguised in the cloak of benevolence, the government doing a great good deed for the people. Once the national identification card is in place, it will become the ID card. Without it, you'll not be able to make deposits or withdrawals at the bank, write a check at the supermarket, or even drive your automobile. Soon thereafter, legislation will require all citizens to carry their national ID card at all times.
Drop jelly beans, GMT, peyote. I know you feel me. Peace song is a natural trip to me. My rhymes are so vivid, you start to see things way different. America's fate. I was fast asleep, but now I'm wide awake. I was under the spell of King Guru and reserve notes. Religion and fashion, I used to be flashy till I had a total recall. Forgot what I already knew. It took me 33 years for me to see the truth. Ever so clear, I was too young, I couldn't articulate myself the right way, son. But now, let me break it down, pass it all around. This is not a theory, the conspiracy is real. They wanna put me in a straight jacket in the padded room, tell the world it's 12 monkeys, so they could be confused. Illuminati I'ma stay incognito in places they can't find me. Make my moves strategically. Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep their eye on me. But I'ma stay incognito in places they can't find me. Make my moves strategically. They say life is like chess, but fuck that, I'm tired playing games with you kids. Ain't no time for playing, check the rhymes I'm saying. I write it for the streets, for the hood, inspiration, inspire a part of the map. Where it's poverty, I started with a mob, but now I got an army of soldiers and troopers. The TV and the radio scared to death for us, so we hit the YouTube up. Now I got millions of views. Now watch how many rappers follow what P do. Now I'm too hoodie to conform to the program. I'm too much of a rebel for me to try to fit in. Nigga, it don't matter the color of your skin. Right now you either positive or you negative. I got friends in high places, multiple races, and coaches on my side. All you got is paper. Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep their eye on me. But I'ma stay incognito in places they can't find me. Make my moves strategically. Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep their eye on me. But I'ma stay incognito in places they can't find me. Make my moves strategically.
All right, can I get a 1 in the chat if you can hear me? Mic check, mic check. It's having some sound issues there apparently. But I wanted to read this. So mic check. Am I good? Can you hear me? Drop a 1 in the chat. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Let's rewind a second here. Let's read. Let me read The Dark Secret of the Jesuit Order. Shout out to your boys there. Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Allegedly the words of Jesus Christ himself, Matthew 7:15. Another one here from Francesco Borgia, the third Jesuit superior general. We came in like lambs and will rule like wolves. We shall be expelled like dogs and return like eagles. There's your Phoenix Rising Luciferian symbolism there. Well, quote, IHS, Isus Hominum Salvator, or Isis Horus Set. It's a few different interpretations to that as well. Only time can tell whether businesses and experiments end in success or failure. This explains why the next chapter can only be short and concise. And that's from the History of the Jesuits. The beginning of the chapter on the company's activities in the 20th century. Among the external historical data, I found one of the most interesting, the facsimile edition of the old representative volume published by the company. The mirror, I think the company there should be capitalized, if I'm not mistaken, but the mirror of the first century of the Society of Jesus. The approximation in the 1,000-page work in Latin, which puts the company above all else in its title style. There are also 125 figures with a longer poem. The images are permeated by the spirit of ancient Rome, with pagan gods' names and literary references that explicitly support Dr. Steiner. That's Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Waldorf education, and much more, of course. Theosophy. I forget how to say the word. It's not theosophy. That would be Helena Blavatsky. But support Dr. Steiner's statements about the antique, occult, Romanist, great power character of the Jesuit order. One or the other Jesuit figure Am I good? Can you hear me with the music low in the background? Can you drop another one for me if I'm good with the music playing? One or the other Jesuit figure is surprisingly suitable for comparing them also with the more well-known Masonic seal on the $1 bill, which could be another addition to the exploration of Jesuit-Masonic relations. Dr. Steiner, based on his intellectual research, gave a glimpse into the cards of, thank you, sir, appreciate it, into the, sorry, where was I? Dr. Steiner, based on his intellectual research, gave a glimpse into the cards of background powers. Also means new opportunities. He pointed out as early as the early 20th century that these two secret fraternities were high-level visionary initiators in the 18th and 19th centuries. In the 16th century, they formed an alliance to exercise their influence effectively. Wait a minute here. Based on the image, it seems that the foundations of this were ready as early as the early 17th century. That's Ignatius of Loyola bowing to, I'm guessing, Pope. Would that be Pontius? I may be mistaken there. But that is Ignatius of Loyola on his knees there. The founder of the Jesuit order. The inscriptions in the Jesuit figures do express, let me see something here. Inscriptions in the Jesuit figures do express the ancient Roman attachment of the order. In an initiation scene, for example, above an illuminated triangle is the ancient school of science, and below is the inscription Temple of the Divine Palace. So this is not the secret of the Trinity. Moreover, the later Masonic symbol, the compass, appears in the hands of one of the figures, while in another image, the pyramids protruding from the water. Go figure. It's page 201 there for another 201. All by design, all in perfect, in perfect order, if you will. Protruding from the water symbolize the 4-degree initiation. On the seal of the dollar, the all-seeing eye above the truncated pyramid carries the same meanings, referring to the invisible initiates of the new world disorder, which they call order, of course. Even the wording is the same on the caption of the dollar and the Jesuit figure. The Latin verb annuo, or support or approve, appears in the figure on page 201. Go figure. Like how the Pope lives in Suite 201, and it's called the Domus Sancta Marte, which equals 201, and his name is Jorge Mario Bergoglio, which equals 201. On and on and on with the 201, like event with the 201. It goes on and on. 2 towers became 0, became 1, etc. And on the $1 mark in the form annuit, the Jesuits were never as eloquent about their own true roots as they were in Imago, but they regretted it, and after the publication of the volume, they tried to buy every copy. That's from the Jesuit Enigma from 1927. These symbols, as well as the inscription in God We Trust on the $1 dollar, reflect the struggle of the Jesuits, Freemasons, bankers over the occult. At the same time, world power, which together with the external power, it encircles the world, arbitrarily consecrating themselves to God with references. And we are reminded of the lines of the gospel, quote, "The kingdom of heaven shall be taken away by revelators." It's from Matt 11:12 and Luke 16:16. And they shall show themselves as gods. What kind of forces support this conspiracy against the real salvation and free development of mankind? What kind of empire, world union is fabricated over our heads through the experimental introduction of wars and false destructive ideas and systems? Oh, wow, that's from September 2001, after the 11th. Oh, interesting. The Society of Jesus also revealed in 1640 that they were, quote, "Necessi novum ordinum," not a new order. And although in the continuation of the sentence, the first community of apostles was understood as a new order, the predecessor of the Jesuit order. However, the signs show that we must name a Roman, so to speak, black magical order as the real source of the Jesuits, who wanted to eradicate all higher spirituality from the consciousness of mankind as early as the 4th century. And the spiritual, he wanted to keep a direct insight into the world only for himself in order to save the selfish, mundane manipulations, the illegitimate past. The, quote, initiated descendants of this old Romanist society were also those who smuggled into the 869th Ecumenical Synod the 11th canon, which was then carried forward by Decree 1 of the Council of Vienna in 1311. There's your 311, another 311, like the scamdemic started on 311. We're coming up on the 4-year anniversary here in a couple weeks. A few weeks, three weeks. In an even more materialistic sense, enclosing human cognition in the world of duality. Through various channels, influential figures in Rome, Venice, Flanders, this ancient Roman state occultism, this Antichrist impulse ultimately embraced Loyola and the Society of Jesus from the 16th century in disguise, but in fact, a disguise. It became obsolete not in the spirit of the world empire endeavor of the modern age, and became the source of international Freemasonry, especially to the west and south of the Rhine. When this name Society of Jesus, or the Jesuit order, arises, the average reader, because there is essentially very little information about what that name really means, first imagines, of course, a sacred religious society, holy men who set out to follow Jesus themselves, before him all that the founder of Christianity expressed in his own words and deeds embodied. However, a closer look at the history of this company reveals, first of all, that the founder of the order, the Spanish Basque Inigo, Lateral Ignatius, Loyola, Jewish according to some sources, was Recalde. His self-defeating personality, destiny, and certain visions that refer specifically to demonic obsession. He essentially incorporated these qualities into his spiritual exercises, in which the novice had to work hard into the struggle of the King of Jesus and the army of Lucifer, both sides fully actually being spiritually realized. I know these fools have to be using dark magic to influence people because they look weak. Well, some might say they do look very weak and very feeble. Indeed, sir. Shout out to Mr. Rob Cleveland in the chat. Good to see you, sir. Blessings and peace. They wouldn't be dumb enough to pop it off on 311 again. You don't think? Well, hey, man, don't put it past them, because they like to do things in plain sight in extremely obvious and expectable ways, predictable, and if you will, in my experience, from what I've seen. But that would give too much evidence of it being staged. Right, indeed, or would they? All right, let's continue. The circumstances in which the company was founded were marked by contemporary political and religious conditions, the struggle against the Reformation, that's the Protestant Reformation it's referring to, and of course, Loyola's connections with the outside world, which her biography usually mentions. I don't know the her they're referring to here, which her biography usually mentions unnamed as, quote, friends and patrons she met in Venice, Rome, and of his annual visits to Flanders, where he can be expected to rich alms. The Society of Jesus and the forces behind it have been accompanied by rejection and dislike almost from the beginning, from inquisitions against Loyola and his particular spiritual practices, and indeed at the very beginning of their operation they played dubious roles. The night massacre of St. Bartholomew, in which 20,000 Huguenots are killed in 1572. Efforts are made to strengthen Spanish rule in Flanders, and they conspire against the English in the firearms conspiracy of 1604 to blow up the entire London Parliament. That may or may not be where... No, I don't think that's where the Guy Fawkes thing came into play, but I might be on it. And including the anti-Catholic King James I and the Lords. If there are any Jesuits listening, by the way, shout out to you. EBT, possibly. Flow state, maybe. Host state. Bro state. Slow state, as some might say. All right, next slide. Let's go. Come on now. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. Shadow banning's real, some might say. Really? Is this slide just gonna... It was not in vain that the Jesuits were called the assault team of the church. They're also called the they also pride themselves as God's assassins, right? And the Vatican assassins is another name, as Eric John Phelps would call them. But in England, they had close ties with the British Catholic aristocracy, above all with the Howards, the Dukes of Norfolk, and the Cecils, the Counts of Burghley, the Marquis of Salisbury. The association was also called the Venetian Party. These Anglo-Jesuit relations were carried forward in the 19th century by the Rhodes Milner or Round Table Group. Next. Moving right along here, and then we got a good video coming up, so look forward to that. The picture of the Jesuits, then, is far more complex than considering them merely as a religious congregation of pious men. Against the Reformation, the renewal of the world, the impending cosmic wit, from their assassinations in the 19th century to the peak of their power and wealth through the interval of a 41-year-old, unfortunately unsuccessful papal ban from 1773 to 1814. This order, which was hated by almost everyone, was problematic and even diabolical. I don't know why it says was. Century in the conditions of the modern age, when in addition to their usual role, mission and teaching, etc., they now lined up with the long-term goals of Anglo-Americanism with a good surviving sense. We need to be aware of this in order to understand world events. The Jesuit order and the Venetian Roman oligarchism that once embraced them, the quote New Rome, the dominated world rule of a unified Euro-American, fundamentally materialistic, spiritless world. All this is so far removed from Jesus Christ that using his name as the, let me see something here, as the name of this company or as a trademark of this process of globalization is not only inaccurate but downright blasphemous. It is the quote will to power that has become completely anachronistic, anti-Christian to the 20th century. And if we are not careful, it may sooner or later lead to anti-human phenomena again in the midst of sublime references, or simply through raw, self-serving, quote, orderly will for which we can even find a reason. When dealing with the evolution of history, one loses in detail or in the completely meaningless partisanship and other biases if one does not try to understand the main directions used by individual leading groups, social strata, to legitimize themselves in the eyes of opposing groups. In the eyes of opposing groups, powers in the vast majority, wealth, power, weapons, technology, ideology, media, God, all these industrial complexes, if you will, military-industrial complex to essentially own them all, right? The pharmaceutical or medical industrial complex, the educational or academic industrial complex, the food and drug food and drug industrial complexes, on and on, et cetera, and how they want to gain more and more power through their means to do. That was a long sentence there. My apologies. Or on the other hand, what is the intention, the course of the inner spiritual development of mankind? Where is humanity actually going? What is the direction and purpose of the development, which the external power by its very nature always seeks to dominate to its own advantage? Can these two great currents of history, external and internal, coincide? Was there a time when it coincided? And if they weren't in sync, why not? How can the inner values of human life and the processes of the external world, the external physical life, our spiritual and bodily needs be reconciled in a way that serves actual human development? Where is the limit of selfishness and selflessness? How can it be believed that, quote, counter forces can be stopped? How long can world history be diverted? What should we do if both sides, pros and cons, the revolution, are also, quote, busy? The revolution? There's your trinity of globalist stranglehold. Quote globalist, right? No Baal intended. No Baal pun. You got your you have your finance power structure here in London. There's your London obelisk, City of London, which is not a part of England, mind you, because it is a quote sovereign state, if you will, or sovereign city or province. No, it wouldn't be a province. It would be considered a city-state. You know, I'd have to look that up actually. What it technically would be considered. But as you can see here, City of London, Vatican City, the religious stranglehold, if you will, not a part of Italy. And then your military stranglehold in Washington. There's your Washington obelisk, which again is not part of America, DC. It's the District of Columbia. It is a state within itself. The principle of paradox in history. There you have your synthesis. Sorry, your thesis. Let me see something here. It's thesis. Sorry, it's thesis. Let me think. Problem, reaction, solution. So it would be, if I'm not mistaken, it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, problem, reaction, solution, or order out of chaos, essentially. The sophisticated principle of the practice of using opposite social poles, rich and poor, right, left, intentionally probably took place first time in ancient Rome, which could remain in Christianity, and with the mediation of Venice, Netherlands, England, it survived till the modern ages. The description of its principles can be found in Jesuit literature just as well as in British ones, which implies that it was put into practice after a certain date in occult circles of both Jesuitism and Freemasonry, which also implies their background alliance, New World Order, New Rome, Anglo-American Catholic World Empire. On the left, occult diagram from the Jesuit image, Imago Primi Saculi Societatis Jesu Antwerpen. On the right, Masonic occult diagram of the $1 bill. Whoops. You have your examples of the principle of paradox, your synthesis, your Catholic Habsburg Empire, European Union, the world solidarity of the Catholic Church and the Jesuits, Anglo-American world government. I guess that would be Society of Jesus, SJ, plus FM, which would be, I could be wrong there with the SJ. And then your thesis. Sorry, I'm going in the wrong order here, but your thesis, your nationalities, small states, Bolshevism, theory of Lap and Hungarian relations, and later the Finn-Ugric theory, left side, the Western lodges. Bribed, paid off, distracted, blackmailed. Your antithesis, highlighted national principles, National Socialism, the far right wing, highlighted Eastern Europe, Eastern Asian Hungarian relations, the Eastern lodges. Yeah, I said that in the wrong order, but you get the point. Shout out to Evan. I'm not sure if that's Mr. Clip God, Mr. TCC, but if it is, shout out to you, sir. Have I heard the notion that the Jesuits were responsible for writing the protocols of the learned elders of Zion? Am I even allowed to name that text? I'm very much on the fence with that book, if you want to call it a book, in terms of its legitimacy, especially based on some of the, what I would call noteworthy figures who have called it out for being a fear porn, disinformation text, if you will. I'm not sure. There are some very interesting things in that text regardless. Let's continue. We're almost done with this, and then we're on to another 2 videos. If I remember correctly. IHS, Isus Hominum Salvator, Isis Horus Set. Next is observing humanity outside of the cube. That would be the cube of Baal, or the cube of Saturn, rather.
The black nobility were the oligarchic
Oh man, not the AI voice. All right, bear with me, folks. I'll speed it up.
families of Venice and Genoa, Italy, who in the 12th century held the privileged trading rights, monopolies. The first of three crusades, from 1063 to 1123, established the power of the Venetian black nobility and solidified the power of the wealthy ruling class. The black nobility aristocracy achieved complete control over Venice in 1171, when the appointment of the Doge was transferred to what was known as the Great Council, which consisted of members of the commercial aristocracy, among them the infamous de' Medici family. Venice has remained in their hands ever since, but the power and influence of the Venetian black nobility extends far beyond its borders, and today it is felt in every corner of the globe. Don't forget, our modern banking system originated in Italy. In 1204 the oligarchic family parceled out feudal enclaves to their members, and from this epoch dates the great building up of power and pressure until the government became a closed corporation. Don't we know this from somewhere? Of the leading black nobility families. More of this can be found in the works of Dr. John Coleman, Black Nobility Unmasked Worldwide, 1985, CoNsPiRaCy ThEoRiSt, The Story of the Committee of 300.
That's right. I'm pretty sure I have a John Coleman video that I wanted to review if I can find it.
1992. Question. The Christopher Columbus story is a concoction. How about the Marco Polo stories? Anyone? The black nobility earned its title through dirty tricks. So when the population revolted against the monopolies in government, as anywhere else, aren't we, the leaders of the uprising were quickly seized and brutally hanged. The black nobility uses secret assassinations, murder, blackmail, the bankrupting of opposing citizens or companies, kidnapping, rape and so on, hence their name. Who are these families today? Well, the most important ones are House of Bernadotte, Sweden. House of Bourbon, France. House of Braganza, Portugal. House of Grimaldi, Monaco. House of Guelph, Britain, the most important one. House of Habsburg, Austria. House of Hanover, Germany, the second most important one. House of Hohenzollern, Germany. House of Karađorđević, Yugoslavia, former. House of Liechtenstein, Liechtenstein. House of Nassau, Luxembourg. House of Oldenburg, Denmark. House of Orange, Netherlands. House of Savoy, Italy. House of Wettin, Belgium. House of Wittelsbach, Germany. House of Württemberg, Germany. House of Zogu, Albania. All the families you will find on the Windsor family tree. All the families listed are connected with the House of Guelph, one of the original black nobility families of Venice, from which the House of Windsor and thus the present Queen of England, Elizabeth II, descends. The Guelphs are so intertwined with the German aristocracy through the House of Hanover that it would take several pages to mention all their connections. Almost, European royal houses originate from the House of Hanover and thus from the House of Guelph, the black nobility. An example, the Hanoverian British King George I came from the Duchy of Lüneburg, a part of northern Germany, which had been governed by the Guelph family since the 12th century. Today the Guelphs, the Windsors, rule by dominating the raw materials market, and for years they have fixed the price of gold, a commodity they neither produce nor own. The House of Windsor also controls the price of copper, zinc, lead and tin. It is no accident that the principal commodity exchanges are located in London, England. Companies run by black nobility families are British Petroleum, Oppenheimer, Lonrho, Philbro and many more. Another black nobility family are the Grosvenors in England. For centuries this family lived, as most of the European families, on ground rent. Today the family owns at least 300 acres of land in the center of London. The land is never sold, but leased on a 39-year leasehold agreement, the ground rent of the Middle Ages. Grosvenor Square, in which the American Embassy is located, belongs to the Grosvenor family, as does Eaton Square. In Eaton Square apartments are rented out at £25,000 to £75,000 a month, and that does not include maintenance costs. This is to give you an idea of the immense wealth the black nobility families garner from ground rents, and why families like the Windsors are not at all interested in industrial progress along with the excess population it supports. This is the main reason why these noble families are behind most, if not all, of the wrong-headed pro-environmental movements of the world that ultimately and covertly, of course, aim to curb population growth. Prince Philip and Prince Charles are the most visible symbols of these movements, and both have often spoken with the utmost callousness about the need to rid the world of unwanted people. The black nobility are the founders of the secret society of our day, from which all the others that are connected to the Illuminati originated from the Committee of 300. The Club of Rome, the CFR, the RIA, the Bilderbergers, the Round Table all originate from the Committee of 300 and therefore from the European black nobility families. Cooperating with the European black nobility are American families like the Harrimans and the McGeorge Bundys. The House of Hanover seems to be German, but is Jewish. So is the House of Habsburg. So it wasn't really the Germans who took over the British throne.
Now, a similar question came up asking if I could give an overview of the black nobility. What does this refer to? Well, if you know something about history, there have been fights going back to the 13th century over who would control the Holy Roman Empire, which was the merger of the Catholic Church and the states of mostly Central Europe and Spain. You had the Guelphs and the Black Guelphs, which was a nobility that tried to assert its control. This was largely an old Roman aristocracy with families which still exist, like Colonna, Orsini, Pallavicini. It moved into Venice in the 13th century or so and became the Venetian Empire, which at one time was the leading trade empire in the world and one of the most treacherous. If you want to understand what Venice was about, look at Shakespeare's great play, The Merchant of Venice, or Othello, and you get a very clear picture of what the usurious trade policies of the Venetians were. Now, Venice, if you look on a map, is not a very good place to run a world empire. And so this nobility chose the Netherlands, Amsterdam, and then moved to London and took control there with the 1688 Great Revolution. The emergence of the British monarchy as the center of the empire was run through companies such as the British East India Company, and that became the basis of the empire. Now, in its modern version, the black nobility is a reference to the manipulations in the 1870s in Rome having to do with the Vatican. There's some people who are saying the Vatican runs all of this, but the fact of the matter is, if you look at where the power is coming from this nobility, which asserts its right based on birth, that is its birthright, to rule and run the world, it's now centered in London, with Wall Street as a secondary function. And the US military is being used to enforce this empire. And the black nobility is a reference to the idea of people who will rule the world through war, through chaos, through control of financial means, through trade, and so on. And this is an oligarchy which runs the city of London today, and through interrelationships of corporate cartels has a dominant role to play in US policy. This is who Donald Trump ran to displace. His idea of working with Russia, working with China, of ending the endless wars is an existential threat to the continuing power of this empire. And so if people want to look more into this, you can go onto the LaRouchePub.com site and you can look up the Venetian Empire or a lengthy report we did on the rise and fall of the British Empire.
All right. It looks like Mr. Jack Talcott is on the missing link. Interesting, with Joe Cool and Simon Hectic and some other people that are kind of inconsequential. Why am I even bringing it up? Oh, you got Mr. Illumitami's live as well. Toilet Bowl as Kamala Harris. Mr. Hank as Mr. TBE as Nancy Pelosi, and Mr. Hank Frank as Kamala. Interesting. All right, what else do we have? No one's gonna click the link. I mean, you're just gonna leave me up here. We're just gonna watch videos. I'm just gonna comment. Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing, folks? Is that how it's going tonight? Let me make sure I'm good over here.
British Empire.
We're gonna get a loop here for you. Here's a loop, just to make sure my sound's good. It looks like Mr. Jack Talcott is on the missing link. Interesting, with Joe Cool and Simon Hectic and some other people that with partisanship and other biases, if one does not try to understand the main directions used by individual leading groups, social strata to legitimize themselves in the eyes of opposing groups. Yeah, I said that wrong, but you get the point. Okay, all right, cool, it's working, good stuff. It's good to know. It's really good to know, actually. Shout out to Evan. I'm not sure if that's Mr. Clip God, Mr. TCC, but if it is, shout out to you, sir. Back? Have I heard the notion that the Jesuits were responsible for writing the protocols of the learned elders of the How does it look like I'm live? I'm not sure if that's Mr. Back. Fuck is going on here? Have I heard the notion that the Jesuits were responsible for writing the protocols of the learned elders of the How does it look like I'm live? I'm not sure if that's Mr. All right, we're in a loop. Jesuits funding a lot of the anti-Sem far-right movements like Black Muslims and the K-Kizzle-K. Yeah, some might say that's exactly what's been going on for quite a long time. What else do we have here? I got so much good stuff. I can never possibly cover it in one night. The Babylonian mystery religion, Kabbalah, Talmud, Gnostics, Templars, Rosicrucians, Jesuits. I think this is this Walter? Yeah, this one's Walter Veith. Shout out to Mr. Veith. Quite a wealth of knowledge if you're not familiar with his stuff. How about this? We're going to take a vote. Do you want to hear this about the Babylonian mystery religion, Kabbalah, Talmud, Gnostics, Templars, Rosicrucians, Jesuits from Mr. Walter Veith? Show you a little breakdown. Goes into everything here. I mean, there's Mr. Henry Clausen, 33rd degree Sovereign Grand Commander. Here's your Baphomet symbol that was sported by Mr. Crowley himself. Baphomet and the symbol of Baphomet on the centerpiece of the main Masonic temple room at the headquarters of the Mother Supreme Council of the World in D.C. It's a good little slide there. So drop a 1 if you want to check this out here. Going over the sigils. Here's your worshipful masters of the First Masonic District of Ohio from 2000 and 2001. So possibly some ties to the Blind 11 ritual there, I'm sure. Showing their degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry. There's your Ouroboros. So yeah, drop a 1 for this one here. This is about an hour and a half. Figure if it's in 1.5 speed, it'll be more like an hour 10 maybe. Or what else did I have here? The Cult of Saturn, the Star, and the Cube. That one's 50 minutes, so it'd be more like 40 with 1.5 speed. I also had a new upload from the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry's YouTube channel at Scottish Rite Masons. They have a video from just within the last 24 hours. All the Masonic Grand Masters in the USA gather in Seattle in 2024. Find out why. That's a short one there. 936. Interesting video length there. How about that? You guys vote a 1 for the Walter Veith video or a 2 for the let me see, where's it at here? Oh yeah, or a 2 for, this is the one I wanted to play here. It's a 5-part series, 5 15-minute videos. So that would be an hour 15, more like not even an hour probably with 1.5 speed. So like 50 something minutes. So that would be number 2. So a 1 for the Walter Veith video or a 2 for this series here, Secret Alliances and the Hidden Hand by Truth Talk News. Now this is a page that's been inactive for some years. This was actually the first video I think a video from this channel is the first one I played on the stream. But there are some ties to InfoWars and We Are Change. So, I don't exactly know how legitimate this channel is, or was, rather. However, there's a lot of good information here, definitely. It's hard, right, to avoid all the shillery and the but they even have stuff here on CoIntelPro and but hey, even Alex Jones talks about CoIntelPro, ironically enough, though. So someone exposes CoIntelPro. Yeah, but all these videos are still up from as much as 12 or more years ago. Immortal Technique on government corporatism. But I'll play this in the meantime. So you already know, a 1 for the Walter Veith or a 2 for the 5-part series there. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. I'm going to play this in the meantime. Where's it at? Oh, yeah, the Scottish Rite video. So let's see why all the Masonic Grand Masters in the USA are going to gather in Seattle. There's your Space Needle, where they had those New Year's New Year's transition rituals there with the big Space Needle and all the lights that they were showing. I think I still have that. You guys haven't seen that one. That's quite a doozy. Space Needle. I don't know what it's called here. Space Seattle. No. Needle. No. New Year's Eve. No. I don't know what that one's called. So we're just gonna play this in the meantime. Let's see what all the Masonic Grandmasters are gathering for here. Something exciting, I'm sure. Every year, all the Grandmasters, look, they can't even fucking spell right. All the Grandmasters of the Masonic Grand Lodges in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico gather together for the Conference of Grandmasters in North America in 24. This meeting is being held in Seattle from the 17th, so it's going on right now, through the 21st, so it's already halfway over. In this video, Scottish Rite Masons Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree, and Chris Ruley, 22nd degree, talk about the conference, its history, and what you can expect as they cover the conference for the next few days. If you have an interest in Freemasonry, Scottish Rite Freemasonry, or even general history, this video is for you. So they say. Make sure to like and subscribe. Do the thing, do the thing. Support the New World Order. Freemasons, make sure you shout out your lodge, valley, chapter, or shrine below. OES, Jobs Daughters, Rainbow, Demolay. Drop us a comment too. To learn how to join a lodge or find a lodge near you, visit imaslave.com. Sorry, beafreemason.com. To learn more about the Scottish Rite, visit scottishrite.org. Join our Lost Media Archive for only $2 a month. Wow, how about that? What a deal. All right, let's check it out. See the optics, folks. Should be interesting. This is where, this is actually right next to Mr. Billy Boy Gates of Hell lives, actually. Right near his backyard. And let's, of course, not forget what the touchdown city was for COVID in 1984.
Welcome to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry channel. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree, along with Brother Chris Ruley, 32nd degree, KCCH historian and author.
Scottish Rite on the road.
Yeah, we're in Seattle, and we're here for the Conference of Grandmasters in North America. What is the Conference of Grandmasters? We're going to talk about this inside, but just very briefly.
Conference of Grandmasters. All the Grandmasters from across the United States and North America, actually, come here to a central location to talk about Freemasonry, all the interesting things about recognition, politics, history. It's fun. It's just great.
So welcome to the vendor area of the Conference of Grandmasters. I feel like we're doing Antiques Roadshow where we're here, and this Masonic bauble is worth nothing. And so we've got folks selling things. We've got different Masonic organizations that we're going to talk to. We spoke a little bit outside when we were surviving a protest and the Seattle markets, which, by the way, I had a peanut butter brownie that was excellent.
How much was the peanut butter?
I think it was $4.
Seattle prices.
It was $4. It wasn't terrible. It was homemade. It was good. And now inside here, the Conference of Grandmasters in North America, been happening since the late 1920s, roughly
turn of the
time.
century.
So
20th century.
Okay,
before that, yeah.
So it started before the Washington Memorial.
Yes.
And by the way, the Washington Memorial's got a booth. Like
we have our own. Yeah, that's right.
We're going to talk to them in a little while. But so
who
it started in
1910. Who else are we speaking to today? We're talking to a lot of people. Actually.
Yeah, the Psyots are here. I love to talk to them. The Tall Cedars are here.
The psyops are here? Is that what he said? That's what it sounded like.
Here, so we've got some friends from the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, but there are a lot of different Masonic organizations here. We'll talk to as many as we can.
Right.
And the question is exactly what happens. What is this about in terms of Masonic, law, Masonic tradition?
Yeah.
What goes on here?
Well, in the past, and even today, in the past, there are a lot of questions that some Grand Lodges can't answer by themselves. And so the Conference of Grand Masters serves as an opportunity for Grand Masters, Grand Secretaries, people in leadership in state Grand Lodges to come together and figure out tough questions that you really can't answer by a siloed, one person. Sort of think of it as a constitutional convention.
So as an example, give me an example.
So come together.
Are we talking about recognition?
Okay, that's right.
Recognition.
So recognition is often a good one. Sometimes there are issues related to how we're going to plan something, or what does a specific.
All right, I'm falling asleep here. I'm speeding this up.
Jurisdictional, jurisprudence question look like, and how are we going to answer that question? So a lot of those types of things come up.
Now, in the mid 19th centuries, there were
1910s.
No, I don't mean 1900s.
Oh,
mid 19th century.
Yes.
They had the Baltimore conventions where they came together and they would decide on ritual and how people were going to wear their aprons and things of that nature, and then there was some infighting back and forth with that. Is this sort of the second generation of that?
Yeah, it is, because there are oftentimes issues that arise, and so where do you bring it up? You bring it up in these types of venues, Conference of Grandmasters, and also a lot of Grand Lodge, right? So like you mentioned, Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, Southern Jurisdiction, Tall Cedars, all these national groups come together. And this is really an opportunity for the leadership to have conversations. Can you believe it? In the past, they just never did until they started doing these processes.
Now, generally, it coincides. And last year, it coincided. We didn't talk about it much, but we were doing that parade last year.
That's right.
2023.
That's right.
It coincided with the Cornerstone rededication
That's right.
at the George
That's
Washington
convenience.
Right.
That's a function of logistics.
And then the big parade, and it was the conference was there in Alexandria, Virginia.
Right.
That's where it used to always be, in and around the Washington, D.C.
for a
metro.
very long time. Yes.
Because there's no plane ticket that says Alexandria, so you go to Washington.
Yeah. And even in some of the research that I was doing for my book, they would often come. They would either be at the Hilton or like the Willard Hotel. There would be an opportunity to meet the president. They would all go to the White House to meet the president. There would be a session on the memorial, talking about how the memorial is doing. And so Conference of Grand Masters occurred before the memorial, let's just say, the construction of the memorial.
Sure.
But then with the memorial coming together, the memorial served as a proxy to bring people together. And then over time, they thought, well, why are we all coming to D.C.? Why can't we go somewhere else and start to alternate and go to different places? And Masonic Week, by the way, was tied into that. The Conference of Grand Masters happened, but that was part of Masonic Week.
And Masonic Week, which as we're standing here taping, has just ended.
Right.
And it really is a unique thing.
That's right.
Where there's lots
more
of
York
side degrees. Yeah, more York related. Indeed. So what's the highlight of the Conference of Grand Masters for you? I mean, first of all, have you been before? You were in Alexandria last year.
This is my well, this is my second Conference of Grand Masters. I think the other ones were just in places that I didn't attend. I think the general sessions, the sessions where the Grand Masters are talking and engaging are important. And then what you'll notice is in every conference, there are workshops and sessions. So you're speaking, for example, on one of the workshops.
And you're speaking?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Right.
And who just photobombed us?
Uh-oh.
That's all right. No.
Hey,
we're on Masonic Antiques Roadshow. So if you want something to praise, but it's been a lot of fun so far. I've had a couple of great conversations with Supreme Council members in particular. So I'm really looking forward to being able to sit down with some of Masonry's leaders and say, here's another photo.
Hello,
my brother.
I just want to shake your hand.
How are you?
You're coming out for
Brother, I'll come to Hawaii anytime you want.
Here's the thing you're missing out. Maynard's kind of a big deal around here. He's kind of a celebrity.
I don't care who's paying as long as I get to Hawaii.
But he gets all these people coming up to him.
This is past Grandmaster Marty Alexander from Hawaii, who is a dear friend.
Hawaii.
Yeah, and he wants us to come to
Who gives a fuck? Excuse me.
Hawaii. Well, he wants me to come to Hawaii. He didn't say a word about you, but
one day.
Yeah. I got news for you.
I'll be his roadie. I'll bring
if you think either of us
cameras
if you think either of us is getting to Hawaii without our wives right with us,
that's a good point.
They might pay for you and I to fly to Hawaii, but until the ladies can come.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah, right.
Well, anyway, nevertheless,
it's for work. I've got to go.
See, this is one of these examples. If you've never been to Masonic Week and you've never been to Conference of Grand Masters, they are effectively the same thing, which is you get all the top people or the nerds of Freemasonry who show up.
We say that with great love.
Yes. For Masonic Week, they are very much the nerds of Freemasonry. And so they all come together and they try to answer these questions, or they try to resolve issues or figure out things that they may not necessarily get in a state level.
You are here not only with the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite and the work that you do with us.
Yeah.
You are also here with the Philalethes Society. So that's
someone is moving the lights around. See, this is live. This is the best part.
So the Philalethes Society, for folks, we're going to bring Adam Kendall in just a couple of minutes. Who is
research institution? Research institution that was around, I think 1923. I'm going to check that math on that. But
speeding this up more. I'm falling asleep.
The idea was lodges or Grand Lodges were not producing enough research, or they were just not interested in engaging in a really serious study on research. And so they decided, well, we know that there's a lot of research-oriented people out there, Masons, who are interested in research. Let's put them all together. Let's create a journal. Let's publish that and share that information and share that with Grand Lodges, share with lodges and individuals.
I joined, I think, in the fall of last year, and I didn't know this, but the first issue I got was the one that had your article on John Adams, and it was which was really cool. I was like, hey, I'm glad I joined, but it's really cool, and I'm interested in doing chatting with you and with Adam very specifically about Philalethes Society. But I'm eager to talk to some of the Masonic bodies that are lesser known. I mean, I'm a Tall Cedar. Are you a Tall Cedar?
I'm not a Tall Cedar. There's no forest in DC.
So he is a Masonic nerd by self-definition and doesn't really know what the Cedars are.
Well, no, I do know who the Cedars are, but there's just no active forest in DC.
What about the Sciots?
I don't know much about the Sciots.
Exactly. There's groups like that here, which is going to be a lot of fun to find out about. Well, we're going to continue to bring you lots more with the Conference of Grand Masters. We'll bring you some live things. We've got some great interviews that will spread out over the next week or two. But please make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you've got a question, something you want to ask, drop that in the comment section below.
Yeah, do the subscribe thing. Support slavery, the New World Order. Just do the thing, folks. Do the thing.
That's Chris Ruley, 32nd degree KCCH. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree. Thanks for watching.
No one gives a fuck. Kill yourself. All right. So next, I had in the chamber. I wanted to watch this one too. 33rd degree Mason reacts to Masonic TikToks. The last one is insane. Freemasonry plus TikTok equals facepalm. But we're not going to watch that. I'm not going to watch any more from them. Shout out to Mr. Mitch. Looks like he's live. Shop Loco. Hashtag Truthies. Support mom and pop dopamine dealer. All right. Since no one voted, though, this is what I decided on, actually. It's not the Walter Veith. It's actually Bill Hughes, another great mind on all things black nobility, papal bloodlines, Jesuitism, etc., and much more. So the Vatican's role and the Jesuits. You have your three nails there again: the City of London, the City of Vatican, and the City of DC. So enjoy Bill Hughes, folks. Shout out to him. I'm not sure if he's still around. I think he is. Let's check it out. The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of this station or its advertisers or this podcast. What is the Vatican's role in the NWO? An interview with Pastor Bill Hughes. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. That's Ephesians 5:11, and if I'm not mistaken, Ephesians 6:11 is one of my favorites. I'm definitely not a biblical scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but Ephesians 6:11, if it is that one, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the spiritual darkness, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places in the heavenly realms. There's a few different, translations, but that's essentially the one I'm referring to. Put on the full armor of God, as they call him.
Welcome to At Issue. I'm your host, Steve Stavro. This week, we're going to be discussing the Vatican's role in the New World Order. Joining us is Bill Hughes, and thank you for being with us, Bill. Bill's an author, researcher, and pastor of the church here in Umatilla, Florida. I hope I said that right. Umatilla, Florida.
You got it, Steve.
Okay. And if you would, Bill, let's just launch into this discussion with what do you think the Vatican's role is in the New World Order?
Steve, I think ultimately they control every aspect of the New World Order, from the political leaders.
Good to see the real ones in the chat. Peace and love to y'all. Much love, much love.
The financial gurus of our world today, and also the churches of today. I think that's the clear picture that we have. And all the research that I have done, Steve, pinpoints the domination of the Vatican in the world affairs of today. It's very secretive, Steve, in their involvement in all of these things, because they look like they're so good and trying to promote peace and trying to promote harmony throughout the world. But in actuality, they're the ones that are pulling the strings behind the scenes. And again, in the political, religious, and economic realms of this world.
Okay. And for those who are not familiar with the workings of the Vatican, maybe we should just touch on who controls the Vatican when we say that word, what the Vatican means. The papacy, of course, but maybe who is controlling the papacy and who.
Some might say all these things are true. Some might say,
Who do you see as wielding power behind the throne, as to say it in a certain way?
Well, in a spiritual context, Steve, Vatican means the divining serpent. And the serpent throughout history, whether it be biblical history, whether it be secular history, as far back as the Garden of Eden, the serpent, of course, was the medium through which the devil sought to destroy our first parents, Adam and Eve. So ultimately, the devil is behind the Vatican. Now, when you look at in a human point of view, it's clear from history that the Jesuit order, which is the military arm of the Catholic Church, that they control the white pope, the one who we all see out in front. At this point, of course, it's Pope Benedict XVI. But ultimately...
actually, it's not, because this is old. It is now, of course, the first supposed reported openly Jesuit pope, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, also known as Pope Francis. This is actually the pope here that whose death I predicted about a half hour to an hour before it happened on New Year's Eve 2022. It's still on record, if I'm not mistaken, on Mr. Ian's channel, We Are Awake TV. I think I have it clipped as well. So that's a great memory.
The one behind the white pope is the black pope, the Jesuit general.
And when you say the military arm of the Vatican, I think it's important that we say not speaking hyperbole, you're speaking literally. But they have a history of being assassins. If we could touch on just a few things in their history, maybe that's the way to approach this. Let's go back to 1517. Martin Luther's come on the scene, and the whole Protestant Reformation has begun.
When you look at history, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses on the door at Wittenberg in 1517. And from there, of course, he stood before the Diet of Worms and Charles V in 1521.
And again, it was just the 95th, as they're talking about the 95 Theses and the Counter-Reformation, it was just the 95th birthday of, or what would it be, the Vatican? The city, the establishment of the City of Vatican? Or, I think that's what it is. The 95th anniversary, and on that day was the superb owl, if I remember correctly. February 11th. 2/11, which was exactly 3 years and 11 months after 3/11, the U.S. declaration date for Convid 1984.
The Reformation spread like wildfire because people for centuries had listened to tradition and had listened to lies and myths and foolishness. And so when Luther came in with his two great themes, one of sola fide, by faith alone, and the other sola scriptura, the Bible and the Bible only, see, these sent a shockwave throughout Europe. And the Vatican, that had stood so strong and so powerful for so long, they were shaken at their very foundations. And so you come up to the diets that were held. Of course, the Diet of Worms in 1521, the Diet of Spires in 1526, the Diet of Augsburg in 1530. Charles V sought every possible means to destroy the Reformation of Martin Luther, but he couldn't stop it. And so in the 1530s, you have the rise of a man by the name of Ignatius Loyola, and Loyola's intent was to destroy the Protestant Reformation of Luther and other reformers who started to rise throughout Europe. Well, by 1540, the Jesuit order was established. It was established for two basic reasons, very simply. It was established, number one, to destroy everything that the Protestant Reformation stood for. And the other thing is to destroy everything that the Protestant Reformation stood for. And the other thing is that as it would destroy the Protestant Reformation, it would reestablish the authority and power of the Roman Catholic Church. In that light, it's so critical that we understand everything that the Protestant Reformation stood for. Most people who still understand the Protestant Reformation think it was simply a religious movement. Well, of course, it was a powerful religious movement, but it infiltrated, it filtered into every aspect of human life. It had power and authority in government because prior to the Reformation, there had been no such thing as republican government. It had all been monarchical, where you have a person dominating the populace. But the Protestant Reformation brought in the idea and the principle that there could be republican representative government. In the economic realm, through the Dark Ages, when the papacy ruled, you had the wealthy class, you had the very, very rich, you had the very, very poor. Well, the Protestant Reformation brought in the concept of a middle class, that people could earn a living, and based on their talents and their skills and their hard work, they could make their own money. So the Protestant Reformation brought in representative government, it brought in a middle class, and then, of course, in the religious arena, it brought in the fact that people could worship God not as their pope or their priest told them to do, but they could go to God through Jesus Christ and not have to go through any man. So
no middleman.
No middleman, Steve. That's exactly right. So these concepts, they came, and these are the fruits of the Protestant Reformation. And wherever you see those things, it's because of Protestantism. And wherever you see them under attack, you know that you see the footprints of the Jesuits. And just real quickly, Steve, without getting too far off. when you see what happened in the 1990s with Jesuit-trained President Bill Clinton, who went to Georgetown University, when he passed the North American Free Trade Agreement called NAFTA, which sent just thousands and thousands of middle-class jobs out of the United States of America and sent them to third world countries. Steve, you can see the footprints of the Jesuits all over that document to destroy the middle class in the United States of America.
My fault. Was I muted there a second ago? That's annoying. My apologies.
So that two classes could be developed in this country.
An attempt to get us back to the Dark Ages, back to where you have, as you're saying, the wealthy, the poor, but on top of both groups, you have the papacy.
Absolutely, Steve.
The papacy being the man who is God. And these are several papal statements. These are bulls that are, I'm not sure if they're bulls, but they're statements being made throughout history that the Pope is Jesus Christ on this planet.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a host of Catholic documents where the Pope takes the name of God, Lord God. He claims to be the vicar of Christ. On his tiara throughout history, it has always read Vicarius Filii Dei, which means I am the agent of God. I am God on this earth. So that's where all of this is heading, Steve. All of this new world order, we're heading rapidly as we see the destruction of the middle class, as we see the destruction of Republican government, where we see more and more power being taken by the federal government. We see that in America as you and I are speaking. Just in the very last several weeks, we have the passage of that health care bill, which takes tremendous power and puts it into the hands of a few people in Washington, D.C., which completely decimates republicanism, where the power rests with the people. So we see these great strides being made, not just in America, but around the world, to have power put in the hands of a few and the destruction of the middle class. So we see the power of the Jesuit order working to reestablish papal authority and supremacy in this earth.
And so, Bill, do you see this as a fulfillment of what the Holy Alliance was trying to achieve back in the 1800s, the early 1800s?
There's no question, Steve, because the Holy Alliance was established at the Congress of Vienna right around 1814, 1815, under the Austrian ruler named Clemens von Metternich. Von Metternich, along with the Pope at that time, I believe it was Pius VII, and a host of European powers got together in Vienna. They then subsequently met 8 years later at Verona, and then there was the secret meeting in Cherie in 1825. And Steve, the whole goal of those three congresses, of those three meetings, were to destroy representative government throughout the world. And so we find in our world today, in fulfillment of those three congresses, the taking out of the people's hands authority in their countries and it being settled in the hands of just a few people. And again, we saw that with the healthcare bill just recently in America. That healthcare bill takes tremendous power out of the hands of people and puts it at Washington, D.C. So this is in fulfillment of those three congresses. And, you know, another aspect of it, Steve, that's so critical for our understanding of what is happening in America today in light of those congresses is that in 1814 and 1815, according to Burke McCarty's book, The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Lincoln, another book that I have here, written by a man by the name of Richard Thompson, who was an American Secretary of the Navy. He wrote the book called The Footprints of the Jesuits, and he nails down that at the Congress of Vienna in 1814, 1815, the Jesuit order was determined to be that group of men that would seek to destroy representative government in the world. And the primary focus, the bullseye, if you will, of the Congress of Vienna was a rising power across the shores of the Atlantic called the United States of America. So the Jesuit order would be sent here to the United States disguised as painters, as lawyers, as artisans, as printers, and it would be their determined purpose to destroy representative government in the United States. It was such a dire threat to the United States that James Monroe in 1823 came out with his famous Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine was simply a statement to the powers that were in the Holy Alliance: don't come and colonize in the Western Hemisphere. If you do, America will view that as an act of war, and we will go to war with you. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to James Monroe in which he said that this is the greatest threat to America since the Revolution. So the men that lived during that time understood how critical these congresses were and what a threat they were to the United States of America. The fact that we as Americans have been so asleep and in such a stupor and allowed this to happen, because we're seeing the fruits of those meetings today through the healthcare bill, through executive orders that are being passed that take authority out of the hands of the people and put it in the hands of just a very small few in Washington, D.C. John Adams wrote this to Thomas Jefferson. He said this about the Jesuit order. He said, "Shall we not have regular swarms of them here, in as many disguises as only a king of the gypsies can assume, dressed as painters, publishers, writers, and schoolmasters? If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is this society of Loyolas." Steve, the founding fathers, for all of their limitations, they were men, they made mistakes, but they understood history. They understood that from the time of the inception of the Jesuit order in 1540 till the time of their suppression by Pope Clement XIV in 1773, that the Jesuit order had used intrigue, insurrection, and assassination to take over nations. Steve, the founding fathers of the United States understood that. That was why Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe and John Adams were so deeply concerned, number one, about the reestablishment of the Jesuit order in 1814, but even more so, the Congress at Vienna, Verona, and Cherie, because these leaders in the United States understood that the Jesuit order had been earmarked to be that group of men that would destroy Republican government in the United States and to seek to reestablish papal domination in our country. They understood that, Steve. That's why the Monroe Doctrine was written. That's why John Adams made the statement he did. And that, Steve, is why Samuel B. Morse, the famous inventor of the Morse code, wrote his two famous books, one published in 1835 called Imminent Danger to the Free Institutions of the United States Through Foreign Immigration, and his other classic book that he had published in 1844 called CoNsPiRaCy Against the Liberties of the United States. These men, Steve, understood that the Jesuit order would do whatever it took. Based on history, they would do whatever it took to destroy representative government in the United States, to destroy the middle class in the United States, and to destroy and take over all of the churches in the United States. And we are living today in that time, and we're seeing the fruits of those Congresses and the effective workings of the Jesuit order in this country.
So what do you think about, let's contrast for a moment, the scene in the 1800s when presidents like Monroe and Jefferson and Adams are against the Holy Alliance, namely the Pope and the kings of Europe, trying to infiltrate and control this country, destroy representative government. And today, when you've got presidents like George Bush, former President George Bush, and Obama and these others racing to meet the Pope every time they can, and actually bowing down to him on occasion. We've got pictures of that.
What we have in the United States today is we have the, for the most simple, we have the ripe fig in the crystallizing of Jesuit takeover in this country. They take over, they produce their political leaders. George Bush was trained at Yale. He was a part of Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is clearly connected to the man who started it in America, William Huntington Russell, had gone to Europe, had been in some Illuminati meetings in Germany, came over to America to start a chapter of Skull and Bones in America based on the Illuminati meetings he attended in Europe. And it's very, very clear that the man who created the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was simply a Jesuit foot soldier. When he started the Illuminati in 1776, he was teaching at Ingolstadt University, a Jesuit university in a stronghold of Jesuitism in Germany called Bavaria. And the principles of the Illuminati are the principles of the Jesuit order. So you have the Jesuit order, you have the Illuminati, then you have Skull and Bones. And so the Jesuit order, through Skull and Bones, has crystallized their plan to train political leaders in this nation. George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., both members of Skull and Bones, take the Jesuit agenda into the White House. And what is the result of that? What did you have? You have 9/11. And George Bush coming out after 9/11 with the New Patriot Act, which was actually pinned by a Vietnamese refugee who has now come to America, who pins, he was trained at Georgetown, which is the preeminent Jesuit university in America, pins the New Patriot Act, which literally decimates our freedoms. So that now people will call me on the phone, Steve, and they'll say, "Did you write those books about those jays?" And I'll say, "Jays? I didn't write any books about birds. I wrote books about the Jesuits. Is that what you mean?" Steve, people are afraid because our liberties, our privacy, it's been taken over. It's been gutted. That's right. And so here is a man, George Bush, Jesuit trained, vows that he will obey the Pope and the Black Pope when he takes his initiation rites with the Skull and Bones at Yale, passing the New Patriot Act, which destroys your freedom and my freedom. Prior to September 11th, George Bush dedicates a cultural center to John Paul in Washington, D.C., on the very soil where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by Jesuits in 1865. But here, at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st, now we have American presidents. George Bush, at the dedication of the Cultural Center, he says, the greatest thing we can do to show our respect for John Paul is to bring his teachings into action here in the United States. So, Steve, we see this complete change from men back in the 19th century who understood the evils of Rome to whereas today you have George Bush with Skull and Bones giving his life to the Jesuit order. You have Bill Clinton, who was trained at Georgetown University. You have Barack Obama, who it's very, very clear has one Jesuit-trained member on his staff after another. The only one that comes to mind right off is Leon Panetta, who is the head of the CIA, who was trained at Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit university on the West Coast. So Barack Obama is surrounded by Jesuit-trained men.
And his vice president is a Roman Catholic.
Joe Biden, a devout Roman Catholic.
The head of the House is Nancy Pelosi, Roman Catholic.
Absolutely. In fact, when Nancy Pelosi was brought in as the Speaker of the House, she brought onto the floor of the Congress her Jesuit mentor, Stephen Privet, to address the Congress of the United States. The first time in American history that a Jesuit priest had addressed the Congress of the United States.
So the group vowed to destroy us are brought in, which may be indicating that they don't need to destroy us now, they've taken us over.
Absolutely. And Steve, the thing that's so very diabolical about this is that the Jesuit order controls both sides of the House of Representatives. I remember in the recent healthcare bill, as they were considering the passage of that bill, you have Nancy Pelosi, Jesuit trained, has a Jesuit mentor, and she's pushing for the passage of the healthcare bill. The man who was opposing it, which was the House Minority Leader, his name is John Bonner. John Bonner was trained at the Jesuit University. He's Jesuit trained. So they control both sides of the spectrum. And we see that happening. This is the crystallization of Jesuit power and intrigue in the United States. It's controlling both political parties, whether it be Democrat or Republican, controlling both sides of an issue so that they can gain their synthesis. And that's what's happening today. And it all, Steve, is the fruits of and the byproduct of the Congress of Vienna, Verona, and Cherie. And instead of our political leaders today warring against it, as Jefferson and Monroe and Adams did, now we have American politicians who are slaves to the Catholic Church and the Jesuit order.
And I guess a lot of people are wondering why others in the Protestant arena aren't speaking out. The Billy Grahams, the Robert Schulers. Why are they not speaking out in their opinion?
Steve, it's very, very clear from a statement that a trained Jesuit priest who escaped from the Jesuit order made his way here to the United States. While he was under oath as a Jesuit in his training, he was told something. The man's name was Alberto Rivera. In a little magazine, it's called The Godfathers, put out by Chick Publications. Alberto Rivera made a startling statement in which he said there would be a sign given to Jesuits throughout the world when all churches would be taken over by the Jesuit order. This was, and I'll read the statement to you.
Okay.
It says this, Alberto Rivera, the sign was to be when a president of the United States took his oath of office facing an obelisk. For the first time in U.S. history, the swearing-in ceremonies were moved to the west front of the Capitol, and President Reagan faced the Washington Monument. This happened January 20th, 1981. Steve, the Jesuit order was raised up to destroy everything that Protestantism had done, to destroy representative government, to destroy the middle class, but also, Steve, to destroy the voice of protest throughout Protestant churches. We're not protesting anymore, Steve.
Right, there's silence.
Billy Graham is not, he didn't protest towards the latter part of his life. For the first part, I think he was solid when he first started. But along around the early 60s, his voice was silenced. Robert Schuller, Paul Crouch, Hal Lindsey, Pat Robertson, James Dobson, all of these men, they're not protesting. What they have become are agents of Rome. And what we have developing in our country right now, Rome again controlling both sides of the pendulum. As a German philosopher by the name of George Friedrich Hegel, when he identified the best way to create change and to get what you want to happen, it's called the Hegelian dialectic. And what you do is you control both sides of a situation, whether it be political parties or ideologies, but you control both sides so that you can create your synthesis. And today in the United States, the Jesuit order controls the very, very liberal, radical element that we find in the White House today, in Barack Obama, and the control that he is gaining daily in this country. But we also have the Tea Party movement, the religious right, the conservative element run by Dobson and Robertson, and some of your talk show hosts like Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly. The Jesuits control both sides of this, Steve, and it's their desire to create such chaos. And that's what we see in America today, such chaos, the radical and the ultra conservative, and there will be a clash. And in the aftermath of that clash, Steve, they will get their synthesis. But that's where we're heading today, rapidly in this country.
I don't think many people know that Fox News, the owner of Fox News is Rupert Murdoch. He's a Knight of Malta. And maybe if we could talk about for a moment, what are Knights of Malta? Who are those people?
Well, Steve, there are so many different organizations that are called the Knights of something. Whether it be the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus, the Knights of the Golden Circle, which John Wilkes Booth was a part of, and who claims that they were the ones responsible for the assassination of Lincoln. Steve, I have found in researching all of these different groups of knights, if you take it back to their ultimate source, they were created by Catholic or Jesuit priests. And all of these groups, Steve, have specific functions that they carry out on behalf of the white and the black pope. And Rupert Murdoch as a Knight of Malta, William Casey, who was a Knight of Malta, who headed the CIA during the presidencies of Ronald Reagan and I believe of George Bush. Wherever you see these men, Teddy Kennedy was not a Knight of Malta, but he was a Knight of Columbus.
And let's not forget the infamous quote by Mr. Casey. Oh, interesting hand position there, Mr. Hughes. But this beautiful fellow right here, let's not forget the infamous quote by him. We'll know our disinformation campaign or program is complete when everything the American public believes is a lie. Great, great quote. Pretty much sums it all up. How are you, Bex? We're about halfway through this video. Any thoughts or add-ins?
I'm well, thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much for having me. And yes, I am. I'm listening intently. I didn't catch up on my way in, but I am. I've done a lot of. I've learned a lot about secret societies and can always talk about those kinds of things. Although I think I would tie it more to, I think I've come out the other side trying to understand how people can pull the wool over someone's eyes and pull the wool over their own eyes in a matter of a few generations, perhaps, you know? So I'm just not sure that they have as much wisdom as we think they do. That they know that they're still not figuring out themselves, but that's just something I postulate. Anyways, I'm happy to listen and catch up, you know?
Have you ever heard this guy, Mr. Bill Hughes?
I haven't, not Bill Hughes in particular.
What about who was the other one? Walter Veith? I haven't played him yet, but
no.
I was gonna. Okay.
No.
Yeah, he's another,
but I am happy to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's got the channel Amazing Discoveries, I think is the name of the channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
Yeah, this guy right here. Where's he at? This guy right here. Doesn't look familiar? Amazing Discoveries. I'm pretty sure that's his page.
They created this language because God confused the languages, so they created a
quarter million subs. So I'm not sure if this is his channel, but he's been on it quite a number of times. And see here, look, just after looking 12 days ago, the UN, Jesuits, and the Sabbath Sunday debate, human rights. Oh yeah, this is probably it. Am I subbed? Yeah, I'm subbed. Anyway, okay, well we can continue then.
Okay.
On the knights, all the different knights, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, Knights of the Rosy Cross, I think would be another one. Where were we at here?
Let's see. Yeah, when you start looking into societies like that, there there really is like it's almost like it's its own fractalated pyramid systems, right? Like, because there's all sorts of, right down to Rotary, Shriner, like all of these things would be like little channels feeding up into big channels, doing the charity or whatever, right? Like, just in terms of like, there really is like quite a bit of, even if some of those even if some of those organizations aren't necessarily disseminating secret information, it's just the affiliation, the mimicry, the symbolism, like it goes right down into, these all sorts of clubs around us, I think.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. They're all connected and tied.
Yeah. And my thing is I studied a lot of I researched online before YouTube. I was in Wikipedia a lot, and then I would go to sources, right? But get the general glance of things there. And one of the things that I see the patterns in is bloodline stuff, right? And maybe the reason why some of these transcontinental relationships exist, in terms of, well, business, but also sort of that, I'm probably getting sidetracked here, but really that it comes down to even sort of tying into different mythological or biblical lore, right? Like there's something to do with like money and banking and eggs and reproduction and, and the repopulating or something, but it it can be told in an arc story, or it can be told in a secret society story, like a religious story. There's moon, money, eggs, fertility. There's something to do with all of this.
I'm not sure what Rothrods means here. Seems like the orphan was blessed to get out of Europe by 1900, considering all that went on. Are you referring to the orphan train, tale of the orphan trains? I'm guessing is what he's referring to.
I think so.
Right.
But I do think that
I'm trying to figure out who that is kissing Mr. Poop, whatever poop that is, his hand. I'm assuming that's one of the superior, not superior generals, but some type of papal knight of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Well, I was gonna say too, like, have you ever seen the list of all the current kings and stuff in the world? Like, I mean, we learn about the second pope and all that jazz, but then there's a lot of countries that do have monarchies and stuff, right?
Right.
That kind of can be also involved is in some of these rituals that are familiar enough faces, but not necessarily on our radar.
Right. Right. I'm sure there's much more than what you hear about or can easily find. So
yeah, right down to our city halls. Like I look at the people in I live in a small town on the fringe of the capital of the province, basically, but it's all the same greater metropolitan area, if you could call it metropolitan, which you can't. But my point is like the mayor here has been here for like 18 years. Like one of the mayors was the president of the student campus or whatever, the student society in university. Like it almost feels like these are just positions, even on the municipal level, that people were groomed, were inherited, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, or at least were put in place, which is just, again, a mimicry of all of this. So it is related, like it's like, yeah, it's just YouTube is a good analogy to it, for little channels all the way up to big channels. But on that note, also it being, not for any great purpose, not in a super nefarious sort of like, other than entertain us, kind of take up our time till whatever, for whatever, I just think there's a lot of boogeymen stories out there about these people, right? With no objectifiable, verifiable proof of what they're doing. right? Lots of information. And the interesting thing about, like, well, how dare you think that we would even go looking for what we think these people are doing at the most nefarious front? Like, just the idea of doing the research is abhorrent, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, so it's like, it's unverifiable if you have any ethics, period. So it's a boogeyman story, you know? Like, and then for the people that would be like, oh yeah, well, you know, I've tried some drugs and, you know, a decent, I got high. Well, maybe I would, you know, for anyone that would even entertain that, like beyond just the fact that that's, you're allowed to entertain something like, you know, your brain, but then you have to show discipline and consciousness and, you know what I mean? And ethics to understand that that's not a place to go down, and most people wouldn't go down there, right? But for those that would, and then would start seeking it out, right? Like to experience it, like, you know, it's just the spiritual lesson of the thought process alone is the same as like the Eskimo teaching the child that there's a monster in the sea that only takes children, right? So don't go anywhere near it, because that's to keep them from drowning. You know, like there's a reason you tell that story. Well, what's the reason that we would be telling this story if it weren't true? Right? If it weren't true, you know, that's even more the person who's like, well, I believe all these boogeymen stories that I've been told. I saw all the proof. I can go to Wikipedia. I've seen the decodes in the movies, blah, 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 blah. Right? Like, why else would it be? Right? Well, wouldn't it just be to test that? You know what I mean? At bare minimum, to sort of to test that thought process so that you could sort, even on a cognitive level, even if it weren't true, who would actually go seeking for it and who wouldn't, you know?
I'll
Like,
be
who would
honest, you're
believe
kind of
it? And,
losing me
yeah.
a little bit here.
Well, and I'm just trying to say, well, I'm saying adrenochrome, right? Like, everyone thinks it exists. Have you tried it? Would you? If you have and you would, you're a sick fuck, right?
Right.
And if you haven't and you wouldn't, then you're not, right? But how do you, if you haven't and you wouldn't and you couldn't, then for those that, then have you met anyone that has, right? You know what I mean? And if you haven't, then how do you know it's true, right?
Yeah, it's like with anything,
Like,
right? I mean, yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. So same with anything to do that we might think these people are doing nefariously, other than keeping us from our, you know, our inherent rights as a people, because they're controlling some sort of banking system, you know, an employment system that wastes our time, you know?
Right.
And then we're back to reality, you know?
Good
Anyways.
points. Hard to refute. Hard to refute.
Yeah. So I'm just passionate about it, because I'm just wondering, like, you know, I was just over watching another panel, and this is really interesting to me, and I can still get lots of information from, you know, this kind of these kinds of videos, even if they have gone way down that train, you know, just because of the structure, the faces, the figuring out who these people are, you know, and looking at why are they where they are and we are where we are, and seeing if there's some reason to look at it or understand, you know, obviously reality. But if we're sitting around, you know, believing that people are like taking some bunny molecule to keep their skin young and stuff like that, like I'm not into that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it
Sounds like
could
a
be true,
yeah.
but I haven't seen, I guess what you could call verifiable proof. But I think we're a little off topic getting into the adreno, but not really at the same time. I mean, it's very much relevant to the topic, I'm sure, if it is true, or even if it's not. I mean, the lore that it is. But anyway, so where are we at here? I kind of lost. I think we were at the part.
Well, so I was just wondering, is this one of the, like, is this a video that sort of down that lines in essence, or is it, what is the secrets that these people are keeping, or, you know, like,
this is just the Vatican's role and the Jesuits by a talk with Bill Hughes, and this is probably from a decade ago, if I had to guess, or more. Let me see here.
And what I didn't mean to come in all passionate
more,
like that,
it's
but
showing an article from 2009. So this is a 15-year-old article they're citing. So it could be about 15 years ago. Probably is about 15 years ago.
And the only reason, just to tie it, I will, and I won't waste your time anymore. I do understand we have a video to watch, right?
Yeah,
like,
go ahead. Go ahead.
But I wanted to say the only reason I came in with that topic is because some of the other streams you've had lately, you know, and even some of the people, you know, let alone where I just came from and what I was just watching as an observer. You know, that came up on the panel. Someone spoke it matter of factly, you know, like matter of factly, right, to the whole audience. And I was like, what the fuck is, you know? So I just wasn't sure, given the topic of the cannibalism and that kind of stuff that you've shown as of late. Like, is this all feeding into that? Is this all to support that narrative?
Right.
You know, or is this?
It is a good point. I mean, you know, how much can not be, or hasn't been rather, approved. So yeah, it's a good point to consider what has been proven, and what hasn't, and what's still just conjecture and lore, and you know. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good point.
Well, yeah. So I just wasn't sure. Do you have a stance on that, or your own personal
topic?
Well, or just yeah. I would say on that in particular, and that I would say that
Why
ties
was
into
that
the whole
topic?
cannibalism
Was that
thing.
the topic of where you came from? That's what
I
you guys were
know.
talking
I
about?
don't even know what the topic was. I think it was just sort of general topics. They got on the N word, and you know, and then someone was talking about. Sorry if I'm banging around. I'm eating a late dinner. I can stop for a moment. I'm not eating a late dinner. I'm throwing some butter on some noodles. But it can wait. My point is that it did happen to come up matter of factly, right? In what the host was saying. Like, we all know that, you know, people are doing this, and, you know, the whatever Hollywood is this, and the elites are this, and, you know, it was just like, whoa, it just came out of like this so matter of fact that I posed it to the panel, but nobody answered the question except for one person, you know, whose chat I was in. And again, I just don't need to, I'm not trying to be vague here, but I'm also not trying to be like a gossip either. I was just like, and then I saw you were live and you were playing this, which seems like, you know, sort of that hierarchical, you know, bloodline sort of family stuff. You know, religious stuff that interests me, you know, but I just wasn't sure if there was any overlap with, say, the cannibalism stuff of the other day, or, you know, is this all like a general?
Not for that question. We're getting into the more technical stuff, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Because I just know a couple times I've been over here, I didn't see you didn't have a link. Not that I was like always here to be a link. Obviously, I stayed for some of the information, but I just was, you know, hoping for some reasonable, you know, to take in some reasonable stuff, and, you know, maybe have a quick chat with you about it. And I appreciate you helping me, you know, just sort of comprehend what's going on. It's just that I have been confused by the last couple streams you've had on the topic, and if you're just sort of sharing it because it's information out here and interests you, or if it's something that you actually believe, right? Like, and I guess you don't have to believe to share information, but, you know, I'm just trying to get like right of center after like a pendulum swing of information in the world, you know. And
I'm just entertaining info, and I don't necessarily know if I believe anything. So I just like to eat the fruit, spit out the pit, and you know, I'm kind of an info-holic, an edu-holic, education-holic. So
Yeah, and I didn't mean to like project coming from that place. I was marveling at the fact that, you know, if the only other person that answered the question was like, yeah, there's sufficient proof to show that there's, you know, adrenochrome harvesting going on, and you're like, but where's the proof?
It definitely seems like there's something in that regard. I don't know if it's how it's been talked about, but considering all the the programming, all the symbolism and whatnot, then again, it could be part of a fear mongering, fear conjuring agenda. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. If you watch the Bad Batch though on Netflix, the Bad Batch is an interesting display of what is possibly the reality. There are many who said that. Of course, are we going to believe the words of like Mel Gibson as if he's not in the club himself, and others who are more than likely? Well, I mean, Mel Gibson is in the club, so it's like. But yeah, these people who've said that Adreno is essentially like a currency within Hollywood and other power spheres. You know, Vatican, I'm sure, London, DC, etc. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it's also possible that it's, again, a part of a fear conjuring disinfo agenda. So I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Well, yeah.
I haven't been in
Or
those
it
parties.
started out as entertainment for real, and through propaganda and the desire to cause cognitive dissonance and fear in people, like you say, but even just, yeah, so I guess it is fear mongering. Yeah, that's exactly what you were saying.
Either way, even if it's true, yeah, it is. That is the
I mean, it's a necessary mental exercise. It definitely is. Like, I mean, if you're gonna be willing to be in a, yeah, and just saying, even learning at something so abhorrent could exist, right? And to realize that there's that dignity, let's say, or piety, or virtue in somebody that wouldn't even entertain the idea. Some people would be so abhorred by it that they wouldn't even go as far as I went with the, well, how are you going to test it? Right? Some people, like, it's such a sweet and innocent, naivete to the thought process, just like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about that. They would just, normally run away, right? But there's innocence in that, and then just the thought exercise alone, even let alone to actually believe it, right? To be like, without ever proving it, to actually believe it. There's just, and then to run around judging other people for it. I think, that's where people, the pious becomes the demonic, when they start looking down their nose at somebody because they've imagined that they're doing something. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
lots of food for
like
thought for the
yeah.
Lots of food for thought.
Okay, so yeah.
But anyway, I'm gonna continue here.
Yeah.
We're about halfway through,
Yes.
and it's
Perfect. And I won't interrupt. Yeah,
it's
I'm
in
liking
1.5. Wait, 1.5 speed, so it won't be quite 30 minutes. Probably more like 23 or something. So, and then
yeah, I'm listening.
I don't know if I had another video after this or not, queued up, but it says occult symbolism explained, but that's not the one that I wanted to watch. So I'll figure it out after. But much love to the chat, and let's continue.
Golden Circle, which John Wilkes Booth was a part of, and who claims that they were the ones responsible for the assassination of Lincoln. Steve, I have found in researching all of these different groups of knights, if you take it back to their ultimate source.
It is very interesting how he keeps positioning his hands like this. It's very questionable, concerning as well. It could be coincidental, but I don't know. It just seems very odd, especially considering the topic and his knowledge
They were
on the
created
subject.
by Catholic or Jesuit priests. And all of these groups, Steve, have specific functions that they carry out on behalf of the white and the black pope. And Rupert Murdoch as a Knight of Malta, William Casey, who was a Knight of Malta, who headed the CIA during the presidencies of Ronald Reagan and I believe of George Bush. Wherever you see these men, Teddy Kennedy was not a Knight of Malta, but he was a Knight of Columbus. All of these men, Steve, are working on behalf of the Roman Catholic Church. Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Rupert Murdoch, they're pushing this agenda over here to combat the agenda of Barack Obama. What Americans do not understand, Steve, because it's hidden, is that Rome is behind it all, with their synthesis waiting in the wings.
And maybe we should touch on the fact that the Catholic laity are not, we're not speaking against them per se. I have relatives who are Roman Catholic, and they have no idea who the Jesuits are or what they're capable of. They do know the Jesuits, they're not in the knowledge about what they do and what they're capable of doing.
Steve, this has nothing whatsoever to do with individual Roman Catholics. There are many, many devout Roman Catholics throughout the world. A lot of my family on my wife's side they consider themselves Orthodox Christians, but in the final analysis, they're Roman Catholics. And there's so many fine Roman Catholic people. This has nothing to do with them. This is simply about a hierarchical structure that for centuries has been hell-bent on world domination and doing anything and everything necessary to bring about that world domination. If it means the destruction of leaders, if it means creating depressions, if it means destroying people's economies, it makes no difference. It's simply about control and domination. And we're talking about the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church that a lot of people today believe has changed, that it's now presenting a Christian guise because the priests wear crosses about their necks. But the Catholic Church themselves have declared, we do not change. And given the right atmosphere, the Catholic Church will come forward and will seek to give what they feel will save this planet, Steve. And it will be the ultimate demise of this world.
And I think we have to touch on the Council of Trent and what came out of that council back in the, if the date's right, well, middle 1500s. It was a span of 13 years the Council of Trent was conducted or so. What came out of that, and has that been renounced at this point in time? Or?
It's very fascinating. See, the Council of Trent was from 1546 to 1563. And during that council, there was discussion among Jesuits who had just been formed, the Jesuit order having been formed 1540, and the Jesuit order was taking the lead. There were many Catholic priests, however, in the beginning at the Council of Trent, who were strongly influenced by the Protestant Reformation. And so they were discussing what would the Catholic Church do in response to the Reformation. Steve, the ultimate decision of the Council of Trent, where the Jesuits took the day and controlled it ultimately, was that anybody who embraced the teachings of the Protestant Reformation would be considered anathema and would be considered heretics and would be open season to be destroyed. And that's the ultimate goal and the ultimate decision of the Council of Trent. Tragically, Steve, tragically, in light of Alberto Rivera's statement that the Jesuit order has infiltrated and taken over all Protestant churches, the Protestant churches today are no longer protesting. Protestant churches today are no longer embracing the two great concepts of Martin Luther, sola scriptura and sola fide. It's not there anymore, Steve. And tragically, we don't have Protestant churches anymore. We have evangelical churches, but they're no longer protesting. Thank God there are people standing up that are protesting, but they're few and far between.
Because I think with us, we would go for our authority on any issue. We'd point to the Bible. We'd say, what does Scripture say? As the Word of God, what does it say? Roman Catholics would not necessarily do that. They would listen to what the Pope has said.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there was an article that was in the USA Today newspaper, and this was back maybe a year ago. Benedict came out and he declared, and it was in USA Today, and it was in an encyclical that he had put out, where he said there is salvation only. Now, he didn't say it was in Jesus Christ, Steve. He said there is salvation that can only be found in one church, and that's in the Church of Rome. Now, that was published in an encyclical within the last year or two. So how it is that evangelical churches can allow that, can accept that, that's unconscionable. That completely rewrites history and brings us back prior to the 95 Theses that were nailed on the doors at Wittenberg Chapel.
Jesus would say, I am the way, I am the truth.
Absolutely, Steve.
And the Pope says, he's in essence saying, he is the way.
Absolutely. Benedict is saying that he is the way. The Catholic Church is the only way to salvation. And a Protestant could never accept that. A true Protestant could never accept that. Tragically, the churches, all churches, we're not just talking about the Presbyterians or the Universal or the Lutheran or the Baptist or the Seventh-day. We're talking, Steve, about all churches. Alberto Rivera's statement, it applies carte blanche across the board. Every church has been infiltrated and taken over. And I would challenge, Steve, I would challenge any person watching this broadcast to go back and analyze their church in the last 30 years, since Ronald Reagan took his oath facing the Washington Monument. If they have not seen their church and what their church once believed to have been completely rewritten. I would challenge anyone, Steve. Another thing I would challenge people to do is to go back and analyze over the last 30 years if their church has not completely watered down their view on who the Antichrist is. Prior to that, Steve, prior to 1980, back in, say, the 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, there was not a Protestant church in America or in the world that did not understand who the Antichrist power was of Scripture, who Babylon the Great is in Revelation 17. All churches knew that. They knew it was the system of Roman Catholicism.
Right, Martin Luther said the papacy is Antichrist.
Absolutely. You know, when you look at the documents of all the reformers, from Luther to John Knox in Scotland, to Zwingli in Switzerland, to Tyndale in England, to Towson in Sweden, all the reformers had one thing in common. They all believed that the papacy was the Antichrist. That they agreed on. Now, there were a lot of things they didn't agree on, but that one they did. Why it is today that we don't hear that? Well, it's obvious. Because what Alberto Rivera said is true.
And the reports I've read are that he was poisoned, Rivera.
I spoke with Alberto Rivera about probably a year before he died. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Rivera, you're not well. Why? Would you tell me what happened? And he told me that he went to a dentist who claimed to be a Protestant. And the dentist, he was going to fix some of his teeth. A dentist took a needle to numb his mouth and shot it just as far into his mouth as he could. And it was poison. And Alberto Rivera said from that day, he said, I have had horrible headaches that leave me just listless. And sometime within a year after that, he was dead.
And the Jesuits have a history of assassinating or murdering people who are outspoken, who get in their way.
Steve, that has been going on from the get-go.
Numerous attempts on Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, it's
besides Luther, numerous attempts on Queen Elizabeth.
We established, Steve, it's a fact of history. The Jesuits were started in 1540. From that point, you have Queen Elizabeth came into power in 1558, ruled for the next 45 years in England till 1603. During that time period, because she refused, this was her only crime, she refused the supremacy of the Pope in her kingdom. She refused to allow the Pope to control her throne. There were at least a dozen plots on her life. If it had not been for the intervention of God and the work of her immediate assistants, a man by the name of Francis Walsingham and Lord Cecil, these two men matched wits with the assassins who tried to kill Elizabeth, and these two men protected her with the power of God, of course. Because all of those attempts failed, Steve, Philip II of Spain, who was a devout Catholic, he was the son of Charles V, who tried Luther at Worms. Both Charles V and his son Philip II both used all of their wealth, all of their political power to destroy the Protestant Reformation. Well, when Elizabeth could not be killed, Philip II and the Pope at that time, they got together and Spain built the most powerful fleet of ships that had ever been assembled. It was called the Spanish Armada. The purpose for the Spanish Armada was one. It was to go up the western side of Europe and to go right up into England and destroy the throne of Protestant Queen Elizabeth. That was the whole reason for it.
The movie that came out within the last few years, I think it's called Elizabeth the Golden Age, discusses this. And probably one of the things that she says, and the actress says in the movie, is that a gentleman in the bowels of the ships is the Inquisition.
Okay.
And be ready. If they land, we will have to face that.
Oh, that's a true statement, Steve. That's indeed a true statement. Elizabeth was only one, Steve. Right in that same time frame of Elizabeth from 1558 to 1603, you have William of Orange in the Netherlands. William of Orange had been in the court of Charles V. He detested what Charles V was doing in his power as the Holy Roman Emperor and his determination just to destroy and to squash all of his subjects. William of Orange, he became the leader of the Netherlands and sought to bring religious freedom to the people of the Netherlands. He was killed in 1584. In 1598, Henry IV of France passed the Edict of Nantes, which gave religious freedom to all the French Huguenots. Well, for the next 12 years, there were several assassination attempts made on his life. Finally, in 1610, Henry IV was killed by a Jesuit assassin. The man's name was Revellic. In 1603, when King James, who is the man whose name is attributed to the King James Bible, when he came into power in England with the demise and death of Queen Elizabeth, 2 years into his reign in 1605, as he was going to meet with Parliament in England in November of 1605, the Jesuit priests of England, the main one was Francis Garnet. Garnet plotted with a host of people to blow up the English Parliament and James I, all on the same day, November 5th, 1605. They got these huge kegs of gunpowder. And one man by the name of Guy Fawkes was right underneath the Parliament building there, all these kegs of gunpowder. Steve, he was going to ignite them and blow Parliament and King James into eternity. Well, fortunately, it was found out that he was there with all that gunpowder. Well, Guy Fawkes was arrested. For many, many decades after that, November 5th was celebrated in England as Guy Fawkes Day. Now, I believe it's still celebrated as that, but for the first many decades after that, every year, November 5th, people throughout England would have bonfires, and they would burn one man in effigy. Guess who it was who they would burn in effigy?
I think it was the Pope.
It was the Pope. That's exactly right.
That's what I thought.
That's
Okay,
right.
good.
But you know what? Over the course of time, and because of Jesuit influence in England, they don't burn the Pope November 5th anymore.
It's probably a hate crime now, and they'll probably arrest you if you do it now in this country.
Oh, it would be,
I mean,
Steve. It would
that's
be.
where we've come to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Steve, there were one assassination attempt after another. Queen Elizabeth, William of the Netherlands, Henry IV of France, King James I of England in 1605. So right there, within that little span of about 50 years, you've got five world leaders of nations with assassination attempts on their lives. Why? Because they were not going along with the Jesuit agenda. And Steve, we have seen that here in the United States of America as well. We have seen presidents, of course, the most well-known would be Abraham Lincoln in 1865, John F. Kennedy in 1963. He was killed because he was not following Rome's agenda for America. William Henry Harrison in 1840. Andrew Jackson was in 1835.
There was an attempt on Jackson's life.
Absolutely, on Andrew Jackson.
He stopped the bank. He killed the bank.
Right.
I know I said bank, the push for a national central bank.
Absolutely, Steve. And the guy who tried to kill him, Richard Lawrence, he tried to do that in 1835. Zachary Taylor in 1850. Taylor wanted to preserve the Union, wanted to preserve the United States. The Jesuits were trying to split it in half by, in the 1840s into the 1850s. They finally got their way in 1860.
That's a good point. The entire war between the states, the war of federal aggression, whatever you wanted to call it, was a Jesuit concoction to divide America and bring down this constitutional republic.
There's no question, Steve. And the documents that are out there, it's just overwhelming. One man, after the assassination of Lincoln, who was on the military commission that tried the assassins of Lincoln, it was a conspiracy, Steve, to not only kill Lincoln, but to kill Andrew Johnson, the vice president, to kill William Seward, the Secretary of State, and also to kill Ulysses S. Grant, who was the head of the Union forces. Well, the military commission that tried the assassins of Lincoln, they found out that almost all of them were associated with the Roman Catholic Church. The Surratts, George Atsterott, Davy Harold, George McLaughlin, Michael O'Laughlin, Lewis Payne.
And Booth had started attending Mass.
Absolutely. And in fact, there was a Catholic cross that was found on Booth's person when he died.
You had mentioned John Kennedy, or most people are told Lee Harvey Oswald is the lone gunman. What do you think of all that?
Steve, it's fascinating because there's a book that you can get in any library. It's called The Last Dissenting Witness. It's by Jean Hill. If you look in the Zapruder film, she was the lady on the grassy area, the little island there, and she had the long red coat on. And Jean Hill writes in her book, and she says it was so obvious that as she was standing there, she heard shots coming from many different directions. If you watch the Zapruder film, it's clear that Kennedy goes forward because something hit him, a bullet hit him from the back, but then he jerks back like this. It's obviously there were multiple bullets that were shot from multiple directions that assassinated Kennedy. And there were three reasons why they killed him: because he wanted to reestablish the coining of money by Congress. He tried to pull us out of Vietnam, which was a Catholic war, and he tried to dismantle the CIA. In 1984, after 170 years of cutting the ties of U.S. Vatican diplomacy, Ronald Reagan sent an ambassador to the Vatican. The reason why an ambassador had been cut off from Rome in 1867 was because the military commission that tried those who killed Abraham Lincoln were found to be Roman Catholics. And so the U.S., in protest, withdrew their ambassador from Rome. Well, 117 years later, 1984, Ronald Reagan sends an ambassador to Rome. If you remember, when Ronald Reagan died, sometime within the last few years, there was a high requiem mass that was given for Ronald Reagan. A high requiem mass is only given for those who have done special service for the Roman Catholic Church. Ronald Reagan was honored in his death by Rome.
And I think we've seen Clinton, former President Clinton, at Mass, and also George Bush at Mass. And I don't think you can be partaking of communion unless you are Roman Catholic. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Steve, I don't think you're allowed to take the communion in the Catholic Church unless you are a Roman Catholic.
So we have some closet Catholics.
No doubt about it. No doubt. The only reason, Steve, that Clinton never came out, even though he went to Georgetown, which is the preeminent Jesuit university in Washington, D.C., and the only reason George Bush didn't come out, when he made his vow and entered the Order of Skull and Bones at Yale, he had to bow before the leader of Skull and Bones at Yale. He had to bow before somebody who was dressed up like the White Pope, and he had to bow down before a man who was dressed up like the Jesuit general. George Bush sold himself when he was at Yale. And the only reason he didn't come right out and say, I'm a Catholic, is because it would have upset people and it would have spilled the apple cart. This way he could do exactly what Rome wanted him to do, and nobody would think twice. If Jesus Christ does not return and take us back to heaven, we are entering, Steve, another dark age. That's where this world is going. It's to another dark age. But I believe that God's not going to allow that. The papacy had their chance, and they failed through the dark ages. This time, before it can go too far, Christ will come. And those who have embraced him as their Savior and Lord, he will take them to heaven.
Well, I want to thank you, Bill, for being with us today, letting us come into your church here in Umatilla, Florida. And let me just say that we'll be joining you again next week with another documentary or production. Until then, God bless.
You've probably seen these symbols before. They sort of crop up, even they're hidden in a lot of ways.
So that was Mr. Bill Hughes. This looks like a Justinian deception video here. Shout out to him. But that is actually not the one I wanted to check out. It was rather. Wait, I have so many tabs open here. Where is it at? Where is it at? Exposing the power elite. Let's see. I'm not sure if this is the one. Knights Templar. Film series National Treasure begins with a young Ben Gates' grandfather telling him about a secret treasure found by the Knights Templar about 1,000 years ago. He said it was brought to America by Freemasons who, quote, left us clues on the back of the dollar bill like these: the unfinished pyramid, the all-seeing eye. Symbols of the Knights Templar, guardians of the treasure. They're speaking to us through these regarding the location of the treasure. Now this goes into the Fabian Socialists. Order of the Temple of Solomon. Knights Templar. I don't think that's the one. Let me see. Ask me about my lobotomy. Let me see. Oh wait, maybe this is the one. It's in the Khazar. The Khazars. A little bit of the Jesuits. Okay, maybe this is the one actually. I only breezed through this, so exposing the power elite. Dr. Dennis Cuddy with Dr. Stan Monteith. Also says here that in the 11th century AD, Hassani Sabah became the founder and first Grand Master of the Assassins. According to a famous Ismaili story, he had gone to school with Omar Khayyam, who wrote "Dear Love." I don't know what this. Okay, blah blah blah. The last line of this later became the motto of the Fabian Socialists. Shout out to Mr. Russell Aldo Brandini, Mr. Russell Brand. As in their famous stained glass window, two of their leaders are seen about to shatter the world to bits upon an anvil. Kind of makes me think of the 1,000 Points of Light, right? In 1118, the Burgundian knight Hugues de Payens founded and became first Grand Master of the Order of the Temple of Solomon, also referred to as the Knights Templar. They were modeled after the assassins' attire in that the knights wore red crosses on a white background, similar in color to the assassins' rafiqs, and they wore red caps and belts and white tunics. Ask me about my lobotomy. Questions, comments, concerns before we start this, Mrs. Bex?
No, it looks like a great video. How long is it?
30 minutes. Well, it'll probably be under 30 minutes because I got it in 1.5 speed.
Like 20 minutes.
Probably like
75 or 20.
Something like
75%, isn't it?
I can't
Anyways,
believe it
we'll do
only
the
goes
math.
up to 240p, unfortunately, but
Well, that last video was great, and it may have seemed like a abrupt and odd intermission, but actually I don't think so at all, because I think a lot of people that watch this stuff tie it into that narrative,
Sure,
like whether it's, and whether they, I just think it is relevant. So I didn't mean to come in all haughty, like, what are you about, Sean? Like, what are you watching?
No.
That's not what I meant, I just know that there's a lot of people out here pushing things like they're fact, and it's like, whoa, like, it's just and whereas that was a very interesting fact-based video about the relationship between religions and the history of some of these churches, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I might have to dig more into his stuff, Mr. Bill Hughes. He's definitely. But next, I want to get into Mr. Walter Veith stuff, because I might not be able to cover it on this stream. I might keep this one more brief. Depending on how I feel, I might shut her down after this video. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. No one's really showing up for the stream, but then again, they're definitely not going to promote this stream, so I'm not surprised. I'm curious to know if anybody got notifications. But anyway.
I had my notifications on, so I got it.
Okay. Well, regardless, appreciate you and appreciate the real ones who showed up. So shout out to the chat. This one is exposing the power elite. So enjoy.
Well, Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king, but in the battle for the survival of Western and Christian civilization,
they sure did, sir. All based on the order itself. Assassin's Creed, the Vatican assassins, as they call themselves, God's assassins, as they pride themselves.
It's going to be reality and not illusion and delusion that's going to determine what the future will bring. I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, and supporters of the station you're listening to.
Some might say the Assassin's Creed, not to be confused with the Jesuit Oath. Others would say very much the same thing. So, to each their own.
They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be views of our good friend Dr. Dennis Cuddy, who's taught at the university level, who certainly was in the Reagan Department of Education, who's been a consultant for industry, he's a prolific writer. But Dennis, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we'll pick up on my series, Will Israel Attack Iran? But as usual, I try and give a couple of comments about things that are current, although Will Israel Attack Iran is certainly a current subject. And the first thing, since a lot of people listening today, I haven't talked to them much in the past, I just wanted to remind them that I'll have a new book out pretty soon. It'll be titled The Power Elite, with a subtitle, Their History and Future. But in the meantime, the current book, which I have had published, is called The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan. And I just remind the listeners that all they have to do, if they don't have sufficient funds, is to ask their local library, their local public library, to order the book so that the listeners can read it. But it's important to do that because we really need to get the word out, because the secret Nazi plan is coming to fulfillment today. And another item of current interest in the news have been the various scandals within the Obama administration. And one of them, in particular, the National Security Agency, and is listening and to various, they would say they haven't listened, but they're just identifying phone numbers, and they then are able to link the names of the people with those phone numbers to the calls, and then get a warrant and so forth if they need to actually listen to a call. But the first thing that I think is curious about that is that even Osama bin Laden many years ago would not even use a cell phone because he knew that the NSA was listening in. So only the most ignorant of terrorists is going to do that sort of thing anyway. But it did make me remember back around 1967 when Dr. Richard Day, he had been addressing a conference of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, and actually Radio Liberty has the transcript and the tapes of an interview which would say Dr. Dr. Dunnigan, Lawrence Dunnigan, is recounting because he was in attendance what Dr. Day had said. And I'm not going to go into all the details of what he said, but it was really very, very detailed about what was going to happen in the future. It's sort of like a book called Lord of the World from 1907 by Robert Hugh Benson, which literally was saying that there would be a communist revolution in 1917, which was 10 years in the future at that time, and then the Western scheme of free trade in 1989, which was 82 years in the future, and then by 1998, ministers of euthanasia, sort of like Jack Kevorkian, and that was 91 years in the future, predicting almost to the exact date. And so what Dr. Richard Day was explaining in 1967, of course, just about everything he detailed there has come to pass. And I was thinking, well, why then? I mean, what did he know? And it reminded me of the situation we have today with the NSA, in that critical to Big Brother is the knowledge of everything we're doing and everything we're saying. And so what your listeners might find interesting is in 1918, there was the first concept of a cell phone. Now, they didn't do a whole lot with that until about 1956, when you had the first car phone, the first phone that you could have in your car, which meant it wasn't limited to a landline. It wasn't like your phone on your desk in your room, and a line would go outside and underground through a cable to all over the U.S. and even they had cables, fiber optic cables to overseas and so forth. But it wasn't limited to that. So if by 1956 they had that ability, so you weren't limited to landline, and then just a couple of years or so after that, you had Sputnik, which was the first little satellite. The Soviets sent up a little satellite. Anybody in the intelligence business could have put those two things together. You're basically non-landline phone with satellites, and figured out even by then, the late 50s, that this was coming. The cell phone of the future, the cell phones that we have now, their abilities was coming. So my guess is by 1967, the powers that be and intelligence agencies around the world pretty well knew what was going to happen. And that's why one of Dr. Day's statements sort of stuck in my mind. Before he began his talk, he said, well, this time we're going to get it right, and there's no stopping it now. So by 67, he was one of these, I think, agents of the power elite, and he was privy to certain information, much like H.G. Wells was in 1933 when he wrote his book, The Shape of Things to Come. And he said in there that in 6 years, 1939, there'd be a Second World War and so forth and so on. And then in 1939, he wrote his book called The New World Order, and he said 50 years or so, there would be a what he called a world state. They would come out of a conference at Basra, Iraq. Not London, not Moscow, not New York, but Basra, Iraq. And of course, Iraq was very important in this whole last couple of decades that we've been through. And so these people are privy to this secret sort of knowledge as to what the power elite's doing, what intelligence agencies are doing. And I suspect that by 1967, that's what he meant. He had found out, as an agent of the power elite, what they had in store for us. And that's why he was able to very accurately predict a whole lot of things, just a whole lot of things. And I think they knew at that time already what they were going to put this use to in terms of cell phones, their abilities to monitor with satellites, their abilities to do those two things together, and to monitor not only where we were, every step we take, every move we make, with the capabilities of seeing from outer space a license plate. They could identify a license plate from outer space, but also monitoring our conversations on phones.
Well, let me just comment that we do have a 4-CD set. It's called The New Order of the Barbarians. We have the transcript of it. And Dr. Day, the medical director of Planned Parenthood, basically said he was speaking for the order. And the reason he was willing to talk to the doctors about this in 1969 is there was no way to stop it. It was going to go through. I mean, it was far enough advanced that everything was in place. He talked about creating new diseases. That was 1969. And certainly the first cases of AIDS showed up in 1977. We didn't recognize it until 1981, but people were beginning to contract this strange new disease. He talked about certainly all the things they were going to do, how certainly the Japanese were going to produce better cars than we did. They were intentionally going to produce inferior cars here so they could begin to shift automobile and other production to other countries. Everything was planned, and you can, if you read that document, which of course very few people have, but we have it and we've duplicated it, well, you find out that literally everything going on today was planned at that time, provided they had Dr. Cuddy.
Yeah, including terrorist attacks. He's specific about that, and attacks on buildings and bridges and lots of different things. And now people would have these sudden attacks, heart attacks, that they wouldn't be natural. They would be programmed and planned, and you could actually assassinate people that way. And I hear the music.
You do, and we're going to be back in just a moment with Dr. Dennis Cuddy. But you must understand, I believe we're moving towards the climax of civilization. What an exciting time to be living. What an exciting time to know the Lord. We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Cuddy right here at Genesis. Well, this is Dr. Stan, our guest, Dr. Dennis Cuddy. He's talking about these interviews we have with Dr. Dunnigan, who actually in 1969 had heard Dr. Richard Day.
So that would be supposedly, I never saw it when I went to Denver Airport, Colorado, a couple of years ago. But that is supposedly a piece of the mural art there, the NWO mural art, as some call it there at the Denver Airport. I didn't see that, but many supposedly have, and the pictures are there to prove it. Supposedly, again, I didn't see it myself, but I did see Blucifer, the Blucifer horse. It's literally called Blucifer, and supposedly the man who put it there and made it was crushed by it and killed upon placement. That is there with its beaming red eyes. I saw it myself, and boy, oh boy, that is something. That is something. Some people say that the city of Denver is the NWO headquarters of the U.S. Some might say. Let's continue.
What an exciting time to be living. What an exciting time to know the Lord. We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Teddy right here at Genesis. Well, this is Dr. Stan, our guest, Dr. Dennis Kelly. He's talking about these interviews we have with Dr. Dunnigan, who actually in 1969 had heard Dr. Richard Day, who was the medical director of Planned Parenthood, lay the whole plan out, saying to the doctors he was addressing in 1969, look, it's too late to change it. You can't take any notes or sort of record what I'm about to tell you, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Well, Dr. Dunnigan did take notes so that he would be able to recall this later on, and before he died, I had a chance to talk to him. It's amazing how many of the people who come up and understand what's going on and reveal what's going on die at an early death, but that's what happened to Dr. Dunnigan, and but it's recorded in the 4 CD set, The New Order of the Barbarians, and of course there is a transcript of this. It's available so you can read it and reread it and really begin to get a grasp of what lies ahead. Go right ahead, Dr. Cuddy.
Yeah, I thought I'd just touch on a few of the items in there so your listeners would know what the examples were. Dr. Day had been National Medical Director of Planned Parenthood from 1965 to 68, and then the next year, March of 69, is when he was addressing this conference of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, and he said, quote, everything is in place and nobody can stop us now. This time we're going to do it right. And then he went on to talk about the following. He said, contraceptives, now remember, this is way back, so a lot of these things we're familiar with now, but at the time they were not in place. So he was predicting the future. He said there would be contraceptives would be dispensed at schools. Abortion would become legal. And remember, 69, that's 4 years before Roe versus Wade. Abortion would become legal and paid for by tax dollars. Homosexuality would be promoted as no longer to be considered abnormal behavior. Hard-to-cure diseases would be created. Cures for nearly all cancers had been developed but were being hidden at the Rockefeller Institute so the population would not increase. A hard-to-detect means had been developed for inducing heart attacks. That's an assassination. A drug and addiction would be promoted, so the unfit would die. Euthanasia would be more accepted as the cost of medical care would intentionally be made burdensomely high. Think of that when you hear about Obamacare's death panels. He also said divorce would be made easier. ID badges would become more prevalent, eventually implanted under the skin and perhaps transmitter and dental fillings. All salary payments and purchases would be conducted electronically by computer in one banking system. Major world religions, especially Christianity, would have to change into a new world religion, and the churches would help to bring it about. He also said more airplanes and rail accidents would occur, as well as building and bridge collapses would occur to create an atmosphere of instability. Terrorism would be used to make people demand international controls, give up some of your freedom in order to have peace and security. And he said economic interdependence would help lessen national sovereignty as people would become citizens of the world. He used that term as well, I believe. And so he was very, very accurate about what was coming, and that's something worth your thinking about. Now, picking up on my series, Will Israel Attack Iran? Previously, I had been talking about what would happen if a nation tried to buck the system. And I had mentioned now W.J. Gent, G-H-E-N-T, who was the editor of a magazine called The American Fabian, as in Fabianism and Fabian socialism, which is a gradual approach towards implementing socialism within the nation. He wrote a book called Our Benevolent Feudalism, F-E-U-D-A-L, feudalism. And he was saying what would it would be like in the future in this feudal system that they were planning for our future. And that led us up to where I am in my series, talking about the fate of any individual, not just nation, but any individual who tried to buck the system, as they say. And that was described in the same year in an article, not the book, but in an article by W.J. Gent. And the newspaper was called The Independent. That was the name of the newspaper, the April 3rd, 1902 edition. And the article was titled The Next Step, A Benevolent Feudalism. And in there, he described what would happen to individuals under this system to come in the future, which was planned for us. He said, this is part of his quote, he said, group fidelity is already observable. The autocrats will distribute benefits to the degree that makes a tolerant, if not satisfied people. In other words, people would, become tolerant, or you may not be thrilled about it, but you would tolerate the change that was happening. And again, goes on and says, a person of offensive activity may be denied work in every feudal shop and on every feudal farm from one end of the country to the other. His actions will be promptly communicated to the banded autocracy of dukes, earls, and marquises of industries. So he's using the terms that they used back many centuries ago when they talked about feudalism. There were dukes and earls and a certain rank and status, and then at the bottom of it you had the peasants, the serfs, the oafs, the knaves, and so on. In the feudal system, there's really no middle class at the time. And so again, goes on and says the individual security of place and livelihood of its members will then depend on the harmony of their utterances and acts, ACTS acts, with the wishes of the great nobles. And so long as they rightly fulfill their functions, their recompense will be generous. You go along with the system, you'll be well provided for. And again, goes on and he says they will be at once the assuagers of popular suspicion and discontent, and the providers of moral and intellectual anodynes for the barons. See, they'll psychologically manipulate you. They'll have ways of dealing with people who are suspicious of what's going on. They'll soothe your ruffled feathers if you get agitated and so on. Again, goes on. He says a host of economists, preachers, and editors will be ready to show indisputably that the evolution taking place is for the best interest of all. The nobles will have attained to complete power, and the motive and operation of government will have become simply the registering and administering of their collective will. See, what they want, not what you want, not the public, not a government of by for the people, but what these elitists want. He calls them the nobles. Again, continues. He says, armed force will, of course, be employed to overawe the discontented and to quiet unnecessary turbulence. They'll use force if they have to, and they in a sort of benevolent, as gently as possible way. And then he goes on. He says, unlike the armed forces of the old feudalism, the nominal control will be that of the state. When the new order is in full swing, he says, so comprehensive and so exact will be the social and political control that it will be exercised in a constantly widening scope. I hear the music, and we'll pick up after the break.
All right, fine. Our guest, Dr. Dennis Kelly, ladies and gentlemen, everything taking place is planned and moving into the climax of history. And certainly, we carry Dr. Kelly's books. All of them are in print. You can call our 800 number. We specifically recommend The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan. The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan. And ladies and gentlemen, the Secret Nazi Plan is still going. They sent their agents throughout the world following World War II with the full help and cooperation of certainly of British intelligence and American intelligence and a cell within the Vatican. In fact, this is last week why we find out that the new Pope is talking about the fact that there is a gay cell or group working at the highest levels of the Vatican, and he is somewhat concerned about the fact that there's a gay group working within that, the cardinals there in the Vatican. Ladies and gentlemen, they've infiltrated the Catholic Church, they've infiltrated the Protestant Church. Remember Ted Haggard? He was in charge of the president of the American Association of Evangelical Christians, certainly a cocaine-using homosexual in charge of all the evangelicals here in the United States. You can see how clever these people are. And then we wonder why we're in the trouble we are today. Well, but remember, you need to get Dr. Kelly's book, The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan. Dennis, go right ahead.
They for quite some time. I remember he's deceased now, but there was one Dominican priest who used to be active in exposing the New World Order and so forth some time ago, and he was really harassed by a lot of Dominicans in his order who were homosexual, and he was gathering information on them and sent them over to the Curia in Rome, and lo and behold, they just turned around and sent him back to the head of his order. And so he caught blazes for that, and he just went to Atlanta, I think, and lived with his sister the last days of his life. But he said the Curia was full of homosexuals. And I remember Bella Dodd, when she wrote her book, The School of Darkness, in the early 50s, she had sort of seen the light. She had started out as a Christian, but then she became a communist and reached, I think the title was like Vice President of the Communist Party of America. And but by the early 50s, she had sort of awakened, and she was testifying before the House Un-American Activities Committee. And one of the things that struck me was not only that she said she had thought it was interesting that the same people, and she said the top level of the Communist Party did not spread this around, but she thought it was of great interest that the same people that were funding them had been funding the Nazis. And she also told individuals, back in the 30s, they had, the communists that she was with at the time, had successfully placed, I think it was about 1,100 seminarians. These would be young people, seminarians who would become priests, and they were really undercover communists for just this type of purpose, that they would wait and bide their time and become monsignors and bishops and cardinals and so forth. And therefore, when they, 20, 30 years down the road, they had reached positions of power. Not only could they control things, within the Catholic Church, but through various, homosexual activities, they could basically bankrupt the church, because, obviously when it was exposed, there'd be these lawsuits, and they have been. So a lot of this has to do with the infiltration of the Catholic Church, and the Secret Nazi Plan book that I have out is important. Now, what Dr. Sten just said about Ted Haggard, the same sort of thing is true under the Secret Nazi Plan. You would have somebody like an SS officer named Paul Dickoff going underground early on in the war, at least in terms of Americans' role in it, 1941-42, and working with Allen Dulles of the OSS, which become the CIA. And Allen Dulles, of course, would head the CIA under Eisenhower in the 1950s. But after the war, through the Secret Nazi Plan in 1968, strategically placed would be a person like Paul Dickoff. And where was he placed? Just like Ted Haggard being head of the evangelicals, this fellow became head of Interpol. And that was an extremely important position for a Nazi to be in, head of Interpol for 4 years, 68 to 72 when he died. Because as head of Interpol, you know everything. I mean, you have the global computer access of criminals and what they're doing and not doing and where they are and everything. So that was a very strategically important position for him to be in. Now, I just want to make a note of this in case some of your listeners happen to know people like this. A lot of my books have sold. In fact, all my books have pretty much sold out, and they'll have, or maybe not have, a second or third run of the books. There are very, very I'm not going to name the groups. They're very, very prominent. Some 2 or 3 very prominent groups, though, who are not into this book, the Secret Nazi Plan. And the reasoning, I think, is fallacious, and I just want to touch on this very, very briefly. The attitude was, and the way the power elite, which is controlled both the communists and the Nazis, and they control, our presidents are puppets of theirs, is that they play one side against another. So when the Nazis were doing their thing and rising to power in the 30s with the assistance of the power elite, and our American corporations, about 150 or so major corporations, was helping fund them and manufacture things for them, they were presented as a force against the communists. That's the way they were presented in the 30s. Well, yes, we are contributing to the Nazis, but you have to understand they're a great force against the communists. Well, the problem with a lot of people and their lack of attention to this book is a lot of the people on the conservative side of the spectrum are very, very anti-communist. And that's fine. And, that's good. That's good. But their thinking is a little flawed because they say, well, let's see, if the communists are evil and bad and horrible and I oppose them, and the Nazis were opposed to the communists, well, the Nazis may not be all that bad. That's their thinking. The problem with that thinking is they're both controlled by the power elite, both the communists and the Nazis, just like Bella Dodd said. The power elite are the same people are funding both sides. But not only that, you have to understand and you have to recognize that the term Nazi means national socialist. National socialists. It's not like the Nazis were wonderful, freedom-loving, independent American-type capitalists. They weren't. They were national socialists. The USSR stood for Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The Nazis stood for National Socialists. They're both socialists. And so if you're really a sort of traditionalist or conservative and you don't like socialists, then not only should you not like the communists like the USSR, you should not like the Nazis either. And you got to remember, not just the communists, but the Nazis killed lots and lots and lots and lots of American patriotic soldiers. If they're communists, fighting Americans in Vietnam and you're killing Americans, well, the Nazis in World War II killed a lot of fine, wonderful, good, young, patriotic American soldiers as well. So the point is, they're both bad. It's not the communists are bad, and therefore the Nazis are good. They're both bad.
And that's true, but the thing is, of course, basically the same thing is true with this whole world terrorism movement. It's created by and funded by the same people who created communism, who funded Nazism, and now we have a new terror group. It's called, the terrorists, and basically just to say, trumped up all sorts of things to tell you how terrible the Nazis were, and they were. But they will never tell you that Prescott Bush, the father of George Herbert Walker Bush and the grandfather of George W. Bush, was indicted in 1942 for helping the Nazis, for subversive activities and funding the Nazis. You can find it certainly on your search engine. Certainly, Prescott Bush was indicted for certainly helping the Nazis in 1942. I wonder why nobody ever mentions that. Could it be that there's an organized, orchestrated effort to conceal the continuity of evil from generation to generation to generation? We'll be back here in just a moment with Dr. Dennis Cuddy, and what he's saying is absolutely true. Keep his word. Well, Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network. Our guest is Dr. Dennis Cuddy, and you'll certainly want to get copies of his book, The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan. Understand there is a power elite. There is a secret Nazi plan. The people at the highest levels of our government, people like Prescott Bush, indicted in 1992 for aid and certainly helping the Nazis, certainly are alive and well and working at the highest levels of our government today. But don't take my word for it. Check out everything that I say and that Dr. Cuddy says, and you're going to find it's true. And then we hope that you'll join us in this epic struggle. Dr. Cuddy, go right ahead.
When Prescott Sheldon Bush was indicted there in 1942, it's through the Union Banking Corporation. It was a sort of conduit of funds that would help the Nazis. And as I've explained in the past, what you have is a dialectical process. So somebody like David Rockefeller, while he over the years has been working with the communists, Nelson Rockefeller is the one who was working with the Nazis. And the way that's all relevant today, and the secret Nazi plan is coming to fulfillment today, President Obama is very, very important to the power elite in this regard, because as Dr. Stan mentioned, the new threat to the terrorists is usually in some form of Islamic jihad. And the reason that's important to the secret Nazi plan is that the Nazis in the 1930s had allied with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the group taking over most of these countries in the Middle East and North Africa today. And President Obama, of course, has a Muslim background, as well as he's moving our nation towards socialism as a nation. And I said before the break that that's what the word Nazi means. It means national socialism. So before you can have a world socialist government, you have to have each nation become socialist first. That's like the Nazi plan, national socialism. And President Obama is moving us in that direction, as well as his relationship with the Muslims and his actual his support for Mohammed Morsi, the head of Egypt, who was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, because of that alliance that began way back in the 1930s. And so the plan is coming to fulfillment today, and that's why President Obama is important and reelected. A lot of the leading lights, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and others said there was no way he was going to be reelected, but I said I believed he would be, because it was important to the fulfillment of the secret Nazi plan. Of course, things are all going to fall apart within the next couple of years. And that's why on the cover of my new book that's called The Power Elite, subtitled The History of the Future, you'll see a picture of the coin, the Phoenix. It'll have the world Phoenix. It'll be identified as that. It'll have the year 2018 on it, because the Phoenix will rise from the economic ashes that are to come in about 2 years or so. Things aren't going to be too bad this year, but the whole the house of cards will start to collapse globally in a year and a half or 2 years. So that by the final year of the Obama administration, even he probably would wish he hadn't run for re-election. But, you know, he's a puppet like the Bushes are puppets. Of course, that means by 2016, it'll be time for another Bush, right? You had Prescott Sheldon Bush, Skull and Bones, his son, George H.W. Bush. Skull and Bones became president. Elected president in 1998, and then his son, in turn, George W. Bush, Skull and Bones, was elected president in the year 2000. So 2016 will be time for the next one, though, which will be Jeb Bush. And so when I was talking about the News Reviews column series I had, toward the end of it, I'm talking about this article that W.J. Gannon written in 1902, and he's talking about any individual. So what will happen to the individual under this benevolent feudalism? See, the world socialist government will be a feudalistic model. In fact, the book I had before, the Secret Nazi Plan book, was subtitled a techno-feudalism. It's called New World Order and a techno-feudalism. It won't be the old, 1,000 years ago with the serfs planting potatoes and so forth, but it'll be a feudal system, which means your elite at the top, your dukes, your earls, all those titled people, and then no middle class, and at the bottom you'd have your basically your serfs under a feudal system, the peons, and there'll be a massive group like that today. In fact, we already have examples in China and India, and even in some respect, California is becoming that. You have this very, very well-to-do group, and then you have a lot of underclass, and if you were the middle class are there, what middle class people there are have been moving out, to Colorado or somewhere. And so it's becoming a feudalistic sort of structure society. Same thing in India and China. You have these very elite types, well-educated, well-off individuals at the top, but then you have a tremendously large number of very, very poor people in India as well as in China. And that's deliberate. That's by design, so that they can compete internationally, globally, for low wages. You have these elite, very highly skilled, highly educated people, so you can compete at that level, but then you have to have the low wage people, so they have a very large number of those individuals who are very poor and work for practically nothing. And I will put a chapter in my book called Looming Economic Disaster in the new book to come, and you'll actually see a picture of a skyscraper in Beijing where the elite would work, and then on the front lawn you see these two women sitting there on the lawn actually cutting the grass with a pair of scissors. That's a great picture, a representation of the feudal system that they have in China, and they have similar in India, and we're getting that way. California usually leads the nation in what's coming, so we'll all become, little serfs and sort of techno-feudal serfs in the future.
Dennis, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're out of time. You're on a roll, but we'll continue this next week, okay?
Hey, thank you.
God bless, and thank you so much for doing it. Our guest has been Dr. Dennis Cuddy. You want to get his books? We have all of those that are in print. Call us at 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-544-8927. I specifically like his book on quotations about the New World Order, but his latest book, The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan, inexpensive, easy reading, and vitally important if you want to understand what is really going on. Now, let me explain to you what is going on. Basically, the Trilateral Commission controls America. If you don't believe it, certainly get Barry Goldwater's book, and we do have used copies of Barry Goldwater's with no apologies. And on page 208, I think it is, I could be mistaken, but there, just about page 208, he talks about the Trilateral Commission, how it's David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission, and their goal is to seize control of the economic and political control of the world by first seizing political control of the government of the United States. That's Barry Goldwater's words. Now, as we pointed out in the past, certainly every president and or vice president from 77 to 2008 came from the membership rolls. Never more than 87 members here, the North American chapter. So when Obama came in, he was not a member of the Trilateral Commission, but 11 of his key appointees were, including General James Jones, who was the National Security Advisor, the most important post. Now, General James Jones just happened to have come from the membership rolls of the Trilateral Commission. He was replaced by a man named Thomas Donilon. And Thomas Donilon just happened to come from the membership rolls of the Trilateral Commission. And Thomas Donilon is being relieved, and he's going to be replaced by a woman named Susan Rice. You'd never guess where she came from. You'd never guess that she, too, was a member of the the Trilateral Commission before she took a government job. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, it's all fraudulent. And the sooner you understand they killed people, they brought down the Twin Towers. It was a controlled demolition. Watch Building 7 come down. It was a controlled demolition. Go onto the internet and watch the center of the roof begin to cave in the middle. And then, of course, they take out the base of the building and it collapses and the walls fall in. And I actually interview in this 4CD set entitled, Why Did the Buildings Come Down? I interviewed a gentleman who was actually in charge of cleaning up the debris of building number 7. He got there the day after the attack, and his statement to me, and you can hear it, 99% certain it was a controlled demolition. Well, that is controlled demolition. It means they killed all those people in the World Trade Center, and they killed all those people in the Pentagon, and they killed the people on the plane that crashed at Shanksville. Incidentally, you can look at the way they crash site. A big hole in the ground and no wreckage. Now, can you explain to me how you could crash a plane into the ground nose first? And no wreckage? How could that be? Well, Chris, because the wreckage is over a field of about 8 miles. And do you really think that the motors of those gigantic jet motors bounced, a couple of miles away from where that hole is? Are you going to believe your lying eyes? You're going to believe what the government is going to tell you. Well, you better start believing your lying eyes. You join us in this epic struggle. Basically, you need to get the wisdom of Malachi Martin, the 4CD said, by a Jesuit priest who tells you about the homosexuality and Satanism in the Catholic Church. You need to get the New Order of the Barbarians, the 4CD set, and the transcript. Our number 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. If they kill those people in the Twin Towers, they'll kill you and your family as well.
Well, that was quite an ending. Let's hear that one more time.
Jesuit priest who tells you about the homosexuality. I said the wisdom of Malachi Martin, the 4CD said, by a Jesuit priest who tells you about the homosexuality and Satanism in the Catholic Church. You need to get the New Order of the Barbarians, the 4CD set, and the transcript. Our number 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. If they kill those people in the Twin Towers, they'll kill you and your family as well.
Well, I can't disagree. Yeah, I can't disagree there. Shout out to Miss Bex for coming through. Thank you for hanging out. I saw your comment in the back chat there, and I just said thank you, for hanging out basically, and have a great night and rest. I appreciate the additions there, the shares, as Mr. Dominic puts it, who hasn't been here in quite a little bit. I hope he is well. What else do we have here? Let's see. In this playlist, I thought there was. Oh, this isn't the. Okay, this is the wrong tab. Not the one with the other video, I guess. Let me see here. How are you guys feeling? What are you thinking? Should I play some more? Should I keep going? It's funny how some people aren't really able to navigate a platform like YouTube in a fashion that allows them to find content such as this. For example, I saw a stream recently that was kind of focused on like this topic I'm trying to focus in on here and analyze from multiple angles and channels and perspectives. And they were really citing some very nonsensical channels and content in general, in my opinion. That being said, there may be some controlled opposition here, so let's see. All right, let me see here.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
My apologies. I did not realize I was muted. My apologies.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
The significance of secret societies and the so-called establishment must be underscored. It cannot be diminished. Look at what happened to JFK. He creates a silver currency, silver-based currency in 1963 to usurp the Federal Reserve crime syndicate, and he's dead before the end of the year. $32 billion of silver-backed currency, silver certificates were issued. And as soon as he was murdered and Johnson came in, Johnson never struck another silver currency, another silver certificate ever. No one has. No one dared, because Andrew Jackson killed the bank. He's the only president that ever abolished the central bank. The Federal Reserve of the time was a Rothschild bank, same as it is now. The difference is now they own it. The Federal Reserve owns our money supply. They create money made out of thin air, charge us debt for it, and we pay interest on that debt. We're slaves to these evil bastards, these illumined ones, who think us to be like dumb animals who cannot think. If you don't use your intellect, you're no better than an animal who has no intellect, and therefore you are stakes on the table by choice and consent. Unless you are an illumined one of the initiates, an adept of the mysteries, you are lawful prey. Adept. Unless you are an illumined one of the initiates, an adept of the mysteries, you are lawful prey. You see, secret societies are the glue that holds the establishment together, the established power structure, the family bloodlines. It is this combined force that works to alter the history of the world away from freedom and liberty to a benevolent despotism. Slavery without chains, a private prison without bars, amused by the tantalizing circus of bread provided by mainstream media propaganda. Now, the significance of secret societies on the history of the world must be underscored. Also, when we're talking about current events, like what's going on with the terrorism, which was, again, all predicted that terrorism would be a big problem by all the think tanks in the Council on Foreign Relations back in the 80s. They were right, weren't they? Well, it also goes back to the fact of something called the Rosh Hashanah Illuminati. Think about what's going on today, the connection between Islam, radical Islam, and what would be considered the goals of the New World Order. From a 1990, I think it was 1993, it says it on the clip, broadcast, over 20 years ago, and see where we've come, and see if the Rosh Hashanah, use your own judgment, if the Rosh Hashanah, the Illuminati, have something to do with it.
The 16th century saw the rise of a very powerful society, based upon a secret cult in the mountains of Afghanistan, the Rosh Hashanah, or the Illuminated Ones. References to the existence of this mystical fraternity exist from the time of the House of Wisdom at Cairo several hundred years before. In fact, the Rosh Hashanah are just a later emergence of the old cult of the Assassins. It seems likely that small branches were founded in various parts of the Near and Middle East, which would account for the special usage of the names of the 8 degrees of initiation among them. The earliest figure named in the history of the cult is one Bayezid Ansari of Afghanistan, whose family claimed descent from the Ansar, the helpers who assisted Muhammad after his flight from Mecca nearly 1,400 years ago. As a reward for this service, he stated his ancestors had been granted initiation into the mysteries of the Ishmaelite religion, the secret inner training which dated from Abraham's rebuilding of the temple at Mecca, the mystical Haram, to the Assassins, through the Rosh Hashanah, and into Europe via the Knights Templar. Bayezid's own father, however, was known to be as narrowly conventional as anyone in the country, and one account of the rapid rise of the sect has it that Bayezid, after a period of preparation for the normal priesthood, was converted to his strange doctrine by a missionary from the Ismailis, the sectarians holding a secret doctrine supposedly handed down in the family of the Prophet, who maintained hidden lodges throughout the world of Islam, and also claimed, after the Crusades, to have penetrated with their ideas even Spain, Germany, France, and parts of Britain.
Now remember, there is a deep, deep connection between Freemasonry and Islam that must be taken into account. Most are unaware that Muhammad himself was an initiate of the mysteries. Oh yes, the tenets of Freemasonry and Islam have a great many similarities.
I'm going to read this one here. Islam, as described by this pictograph here, or graph thingy, as you can see, you got the Sufi, not the Sufi, the Islam symbol there, the crescent moon, and the Illuminati pyramid, some might say, the Freemasonic compass with the G representing geometry or God, gematria, sacred geometry again, and much more. Some might say Genesis. Then you have the Star of Remphan, or the Seal of Solomon, or the Star of David. Many other names there for that symbol. And then you have the compass with the 333 90-degree angle 4 times there. With the news, with the northeast, west, south symbol there. But Islam standing for I, from the creator of the universe, representing mother and child, from hence you came. The S for self. Each one of us is a trinity, this being the symbol of civilization, and the L standing for law, the length, angle, and width of the cosmic energies that marked you. Others would say that the law stands for land, air, and water, of course, referring to land being the common law of the land, and then air, law of the air, trust law, law of the water, admiralty maritime. It's up for interpretation. And then A standing for Am, the joining of the 2 trinities, male and female principles, the truing, which creates another I Am, and then Master, this being the glyph for the planet Earth, planet, as it's said here. I'm not saying it's a planet, but planet Earth, of which we are on and aspire to be master navigators upon. Let's continue.
However this may be, the illuminated ones soon became more than a headache for the governors of Afghanistan, the Mughal rulers of India, and their Persian neighbors. Not far from Peshawar, which is now in the northwest of Pakistan, Bayezid set up a small school where he carefully coached those who had been initiated by him in the knowledge of the supernatural that he claimed. A period of probation was expected from each candidate, during which he would go into periods of concealment or meditation, known as kilawat, or silence. During this time, he was to receive the illumination, which was emanated from the Supreme Being, who desired a class of perfect men and women to carry out the organization and direction of the world. Bayezid collected in this way, over a period of 3 years, about 50 staunch disciples whom he had trained in obedience and to whom, so we are told, he had shown a way whereby they could liberate their inner powers. Well, this meant that they were ready to follow his further instructions. These orders, according to what his opponents say, were that the whole sect would now become bandits, to prey upon the rest of the world, and all those who could not identify themselves by their secret sign were their legal and lawful prey. Little information is available from the other side, but 3 letters said to have been written from one branch to another contain an outline, a plan to reshape the entire social system of the world, first taking control of individual countries one by one. And where have we heard that before? We've heard it from every one of the histories of all of these different sects of Mystery Babylon, which on the outward appearance seem to be different from each other. But on the esoteric level, are one and the same religion, with one and the same plan, with one and the same goal, all working toward that end. And the end always, always justifies the means. Now, 40 years after the last religio-military leader of the Afghan illuminated ones died, a society of the same name, the Illuminati, came into being in Germany, formed, it is said, by Adam Weishaupt. The young Jesuit priest, a professor of canon law at the Jesuit Ingolstadt University. Coincidences of date and beliefs connect these Bavarian Illuminati with the Afghan ones, and also with the other cults which called themselves illuminated. In actual fact, they are all the same. The beginning of the 17th century saw the foundation of the illuminated ones of Spain, the Alumbrados, condemned in an edict of the Grand Inquisition in 1623, out of which the condemned Ignatius Loyola emerged as a man immune to prosecution, arrest, or accusation from any king, prince, or prelate, as the head of one of the most powerful secret societies ever organized, the Society of Jesus, now known as the Jesuits. Ignatius Loyola had been the leader of the Alumbrados in Spain, and it was his sect, the illuminated ones, or the Alumbrados, which became the Society of Jesus. In 1654, the illuminated Guernets came into public notice in France. Now, documents still extant show several points of resemblance between the German and Central Asian Illuminists, points which are hard to account for on the grounds of pure coincidence, and yet which still might, one supposes, be nothing more than that. The Prophet Muhammad, for example, is claimed as an initiate by the Western Illuminati. Their calendar is the very same which survived in current usage in the former Iranian territories among the Afghans of the time. New Year's Day with them was the same day as the Persian and Afghan Newroz festival. Further, the degrees of initiation, although seemingly artificial ones coupled with some of the degrees of Freemasonry, were also 8. And there are parallels in the naming of the individual degrees. Like the Roshaniya, the Illuminati stated that they had the objective of gaining important converts for the purpose of improving the state of the world. A comparison of the degrees shows the similarity. In the Roshaniya, the seeker, and in the Illuminati, the apprentice. In the Roshaniya, the disciple; in the Illuminati, the fellow craft. In the Roshaniya, the devotee; in the Illuminati, the master. In the Roshaniya, the enlightened one; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus major. In the Roshaniya, the master; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus dirigens. In the Roshaniya, the commander or emir; and in the Illuminati, prince. In the Roshaniya, priest; in the Illuminati, priest. In the Roshaniya, king or chief; in the Illuminati, king. Now, the early stages of initiation were designed to admit people into the brotherhood, to test them for reliability, and possibly to train them for responsible tasks connected with the greater diffusion of knowledge. Even in higher degrees, it seems that tests are also applied. Those who were to become priests, for example, were taken to a secret place where a throne stood, with before it the choice of priestly or royal regalia. The aspirant had to make the choice. Those who opted for the symbols of worldly power were dismissed promptly, but candidates taking up the sacred vestments were saluted with the phrase, "Hail, O Holy One." The members of this degree were considered teachers in whose hands was the training of disciples. Priests identified themselves with a secret sign. Both hands crossed were placed flat upon the head. In shaking hands, the priest extended his palm with the thumb held vertically upwards. The countersign was a fist with the thumb enclosed within it. Princes were those who could influence events at a very high level, either in academic or political affairs. The room in which the initiation to this high and secret degree was celebrated was hung with red. The garments which the prince was to wear were red and white. Now these are, of course, the colors of the Ismailis as well. In the ritual, the candidate is presented as a slave and states that he wants to liberate society from tyranny. The sign of the degree was the extending of both arms. As the countersign, before taking the hand of another, the prince gripped both his elbows. In 1786, a raid upon the house of an influential lawyer, Zwack, reveals secret papers connected with the order, and it is through those that many of the inner workings of the organization became known. Men were to be influenced through their women folk, and a large-scale plan for initiating women members was at an advanced stage of development. It has been widely claimed and touted that many of the charges which were made against the German Illuminati were false, and that the possession of instructions, for instance, on forging seals, was due to the fact that the lawyer Zwack had a collection devoted to that subject, as a matter of legal interest to him. It is also said that the project of enrolling women and young girls had in actual fact been taken from the aims of a very different society, the Mopses. While this matter still remains open, however, one may as well examine some of the documents which are stated to have belonged to the society. Zwack had written, in his own hand, a document describing the manufacture of a strongbox which would blow up if it were tampered with. He also had a collection of impressions of the seals of several hundred important persons, and the already mentioned data on how to forge or substitute them. These, he stated in a letter of protest, were a part of the exhibits of his criminological collection. The famous memorandum detailing the plan to win over women to the cause comes from papers seized at the home of Baron Bassus, one of the members. The document states that women are the best means of influencing men. They should be enrolled, and into their minds put a hope that they might themselves in time be released from the tyranny of public opinion. Another letter asks how young women can be influenced, since their mothers would not consent to their being placed under the Illuminati for instruction. 5 women were suggested by one member as a start. They were 4 stepdaughters of one of the Illuminati, who were to be placed in the care of the wife of yet another illuminated one. They, in their turn, would enlarge the society through their friends. It was further mentioned that women are not considered to be really suitable for such an undertaking, because they are, quote, fickle and impatient, unquote. But the order was most sorely hit by the fact that something quite discreditable to the character of the founder was discovered, and it was thought that he might be trying to use the organization for personal reasons. Now, the establishment version goes something like this. Weishaupt, upon the suppression of the order, refused a pension which he was offered after he had been dismissed from his professorial chair. He attributed his downfall to the machinations of the Jesuits, whom he hated and who had opposed him, as he was not of their number, whereas they considered the university post which he held to be a long-standing prerogative of their own. And nothing could be farther from the truth, for Adam Weishaupt was himself a Jesuit priest, holding a professorial chair at a Jesuit university. Now, he and Zwack were both banished, and little is heard of them thereafter, although there are rumors that they carried on the society, respectively, in Saxe-Coburg in the Netherlands.
2 quick notes here. First of all, the Jesuits play a huge role in the New World Order. And of course, now we have a Jesuit Pope who says, come to me, not to Jesus, just like Pope John Paul did, John Paul II, by the way, who, if you didn't know, sold Zyklon B gas. He was a salesperson for the Nazis in Poland during the war. Just like this Pope, his machinations with the Sandinistas and all of these things that went on in '76, Bergoglio, the current Pope, being involved in a kidnapping ring. But I digress. The second thing to consider is, again, this is just to expose these people for who they are and what they really are doing. Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, or the Saxe-Coburgs, are the Windsor family, and the family in the Netherlands, Queen Beatrice and Queen Elizabeth, happen to be cousins. And yes, her real name is Saxe-Coburg, not Windsor. They took the Windsor name because they didn't want to reveal that they're Germans. During the World War I, there was sentiment, anti-German sentiment, so they thought it would be good to change their name, because technically they are Bavarian Germans. It's all starting to come together, I hope, as far as putting the pieces together so that we can know the enemy. Because the only way we're going to be able to fight the enemy and maintain our liberty is to know the enemy.
40 years after the last religio-military leader of the Afghan Illuminated Ones died, a society of the same name, the Illuminati, came into being in Germany, formed, it is said, by Adam Weishaupt. The young Jesuit priest, a professor of canon law at the Jesuit Ingolstadt University, Coincidences of date and beliefs connect these Bavarian Illuminati with the Afghan ones, and also with the other cults which called themselves Illuminated. In actual fact, they are all the same. The beginning of the 17th century saw the foundation of the Illuminated ones of Spain, the Alumbrados, condemned in an edict of the Grand Inquisition in 1623, out of which the condemned Ignatius Loyola emerged as a man immune to prosecution, arrest, or accusation from any king, prince, or prelate, as the head of one of the most powerful secret societies ever organized, the Society of Jesus, now known as the Jesuits. Ignatius Loyola had been the leader of the Alumbrados in Spain, and it was his sect, the Illuminated ones, or the Alumbrados, which became the Society of Jesus. In 1654, the Illuminated Guernets came into public notice in France. Now, documents still extant show several points of resemblance between the German and Central Asian Illuminists, points which are hard to account for on the grounds of pure coincidence, and yet which still might, one supposes, be nothing more than that. The Prophet Muhammad, for example, is claimed as an initiate by the Western Illuminati. Their calendar is the very same which survived in current usage in the former Iranian territories among the Afghans of the time. New Year's Day with them was the same day as the Persian and Afghan Newroz festival. Further, the degrees of initiation, although seemingly artificial ones coupled with some of the degrees of Freemasonry, were also 8. And there are parallels in the naming of the individual degrees. Like the Roshaniya, the Illuminati stated that they had the objective of gaining important converts for the purpose of improving the state of the world. A comparison of the degrees shows the similarity. In the Roshaniya, the seeker, and in the Illuminati, the apprentice. In the Roshaniya, the disciple; in the Illuminati, the fellow craft. In the Roshaniya, the devotee; in the Illuminati, the master. In the Roshaniya, the enlightened one; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus major. In the Roshaniya, the master; in the Illuminati, the Illuminatus dirigens. In the Roshaniya, the commander or emir; and in the Illuminati, prince. In the Roshaniya, priest; in the Illuminati, priest. In the Roshaniya, king or chief; in the Illuminati, king. Now, the early stages of initiation were designed to admit people into the brotherhood, to test them for reliability, and possibly to train them for responsible tasks connected with the greater diffusion of knowledge. Even in higher degrees, it seems that tests are also applied. Those who were to become priests, for example, were taken to a secret place where a throne stood, with before it the choice of priestly or royal regalia. The aspirant had to make the choice. Those who opted for the symbols of worldly power were dismissed promptly, but candidates taking up the sacred vestments were saluted with the phrase, "Hail, O Holy One." The members of this degree were considered teachers in whose hands was the training of disciples. Priests identified themselves with a secret sign. Both hands crossed were placed flat upon the head. In shaking hands, the priest extended his palm with the thumb held vertically upwards. The countersign was a fist with the thumb enclosed within it. Princes were those who could influence events at a very high level, either in academic or political affairs. The room in which the initiation to this high and secret degree was celebrated was hung with red. The garments which the prince was to wear were red and white. Now, these are, of course, the colors of the Ismailis as well. In the ritual, the candidate is presented as a slave and states that he wants to liberate society from tyranny. The sign of the degree was the extending of both arms. As the countersign, before taking the hand of another, the prince gripped both his elbows. In 1786, a raid upon the house of an influential lawyer, Zwack, revealed secret papers connected with the order, and it is through those that many of the inner workings of the organization became known. Men were to be influenced through their women folk, and a large-scale plan for initiating women members was at an advanced stage of development. It has been widely claimed and touted that many of the charges which were made against the German Illuminati were false, and that the possession of instructions, for instance, on forging seals, was due to the fact that the lawyer Zwack had a collection devoted to that subject, as a matter of legal interest to him. It is also said that the project of enrolling women and young girls had in actual fact been taken from the aims of a very different society, the Mopses. While this matter still remains open, however, one may as well examine some of the documents which are stated to have belonged to the society. Zwack had written in his own hand a document describing the manufacture of a strongbox which would blow up if it were tampered with. He also had a collection of impressions of the seals of several hundred important persons, and the already mentioned data on how to forge or substitute them. These, he stated in a letter of protest, were a part of the exhibits of his criminological collection. The famous memorandum detailing the plan to win over women to the cause comes from papers seized at the home of Baron Bassus, one of the members. The document states that women are the best means of influencing men. They should be enrolled, and into their minds put a hope that they might themselves in time be released from the tyranny of public opinion. Another letter asks how young women can be influenced, since their mothers would not consent to their being placed under the Illuminati for instruction. 5 women were suggested by one member as a start. They were 4 stepdaughters of one of the Illuminati, who were to be placed in the care of the wife of yet another illuminated one. They, in their turn, would enlarge the society through their friends. It was further mentioned that women are not considered to be really suitable for such an undertaking, because they are, quote, fickle and impatient, unquote. But the order was most sorely hit by the fact that something quite discreditable to the character of the founder was discovered, and it was thought that he might be trying to use the organization for personal reasons. Now, the establishment version goes something like this. Weishaupt, upon the suppression of the order, refused a pension which he was offered after he had been dismissed from his professorial chair. He attributed his downfall to the machinations of the Jesuits, whom he hated and who had opposed him, as he was not of their number, whereas they considered the university post which he held to be a long-standing prerogative of their own. And nothing could be farther from the truth, for Adam Weishaupt was himself a Jesuit priest, holding a professorial chair at a Jesuit university. Now, he and Zwack were both banished, and little is heard of them thereafter, although there are rumors that they carried on the society respectively in Saxe-Coburg in the Netherlands. Another incident that you will not hear in establishment accounts is the story of the messenger riding from one Bavarian Illuminati lodge to another, who was literally struck by lightning, divine intervention, if you will, struck dead from his horse in his pouch carrying the papers of a secret plan to take over individual nations and ultimately the world, were put into the hands of the Bavarian government. And many of the portions of these papers are almost word for word what later became known as the protocols of the wise men
of Sion. Yes, this is a work that was written to be blamed upon the Jews, using the Jews as scapegoats, because the Illuminati, while some are Jews, are of all backgrounds and faiths, cover faiths, but they all serve one God, and that God is Lucifer, knowledge. They believe that man will evolve to become gods and they rule over us because they have the intellect. They believe intellect will lead them to become gods. And many of them believe they are already gods. They call themselves the Olympians. Now, the protocols of the Elders of Zion dates back to the 18th century, the original tellings. Now, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, if you go to Wikipedia, they use the word forgery over and over again, fabricating text, anti-Semitic fabricated text purporting to describe a Jewish plan for global domination. This was written to do exactly that. It was written by the Illuminati, by the order, revealing their plan. But to blame it on the Jews, so that they had him as a scapegoat yet again. Henry Ford funded like 500,000 copies of it and distributed it throughout the U.S. in the 1920s. And the plan has come true. There's no doubt about it. But it is not a Jewish conspiracy. It was first published in Russia in 1903 and translated into many languages. It was originally written by Sergei Nelius and distributed between 1902 and 1903. The quote-unquote fraud or hoax that they called it. But history proves it to not be a hoax. And the fact of the matter is that the Agenda 21 protocols, all of the world government aspect, and all of these things that we're covering here today is all related to the protocols of the Elders of Zion. But it is not a Jewish conspiracy. Make no mistake about that. But Agenda 21, NATO, and this unbelievable fact regarding the goals of world government from Jerusalem coming from Ben-Gurion illustrates this clearly, that the goals are all the same of all the secret societies, world police state, everything else. It's all laid out, clear as day.
Illuminism had spread to France. However, some years before its suppression in Germany, influential personages were members, many drawn from the ranks of the important Freemasons of Paris. As in the case of the German branch, it was soon alleged that they pursued terrible aims and practiced frightful orgies. An extract from a French book of the 1790s, La Secte des Illuminés, will give a fair idea of this. The huge chateau of Ermenonville near Paris was one of the chief lodges of the Illuminated. It belonged to the Marquis of Girardin, who protected Rousseau and later gave him a tomb on his estate. Saint Germain, the notable impostor, presided over it. He claimed to be 1,000 years old and be able to make gold. He was said to be immortal, but strangely died in 1784. And even today, some Looney Tune wackos claim that they converse with Saint Germain, who's still alive, walking around in a modern-day suit and tie. Well, on the day of his initiation at the chateau of Ermenonville, the candidate was conducted through a long, dark passage into an immense hall draped with black. There were faint lamps set around the room. There were men dressed as corpses in shrouds. There was an altar of human skeletons, which stood in the center of a large hall. And in the darkness, in the flickering, low lamplight, the priest conducting the initiation resembled ghostly forms moving through the hall. And everywhere there was the stench of some terrible odor. Two men dressed as specters always appeared and tied a pink band or ribbon which was smeared with blood around the forehead of the candidate. Upon this was an image of the Lady of Loretto. Does this sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? A crucifix was placed in his hand and an amulet hung around his neck. He was asked to remove his clothes, and if he showed any hesitancy, his clothes were removed for him and laid upon a funeral pyre. Crosses of blood were smeared upon his body, and then his genitalia were tied with a ribbon or with string. Then frightening figures, covered with blood and mumbling strange incantations, approached and threw themselves down in prayer. After a long period of time, weeping, crying, wailing broke out as if a herd, a plethora of mourners, were bereaved upon the death of their closest and deepest love. The funeral pyre burned brighter and brighter. All of the clothes of the initiate were consumed. And from behind or near this fire, one of the priests emerged almost as if he had taken form from the smoke of the pyre itself. And the five figures went into convulsions, and loud wailing and screaming took place. And then came the voice of someone concealed behind a curtain. These oaths which the candidate had to repeat. Quote, "In the name of the crucified one, I swear to sever all bonds which unite me with mother, brothers, sisters, wife, relatives, friends, mistress, king, superiors, benefactors, or any other man to whom I have promised faith, service, or obedience." Quote, "I name the place in which I was born. Henceforth I live in another dimension, which I will not reach until I have renounced the evil globe which has been cursed by heaven. From now onwards I shall reveal to my new chief all that I have heard or found out, and I shall also seek out and observe things which might otherwise have escaped me. I honor the aqua profana. It is a quick and essential medium of removing from the earth, through death or robbing them of their wits, of those who oppose truth and those who try to take it from our hands. I shall avoid Spain, Naples, and all other accursed lands, and I shall avoid the temptation to betray what I have now heard. Lightning will not strike as rapidly as the dagger, which will reach me wherever I may be, should I betray my initiation." Unquote. Then a 7-branched candelabrum bearing 7 black candles was placed before the candidate, and a large bowl containing human blood. The candidate washed himself in the blood and drank a quantity of it. The string around his genitalia was removed, and then he was carried to a bath to undergo complete ablution. After this, he was given a meal composed of root vegetables. Now, folks, while it is possible that such ceremonies as this have actually taken place, and we know that they have, because it is the exact ceremony that George Bush underwent in the crypt, or what is known as the tomb, the Skull and Bones, at Yale University. But it will be recalled that such items as human blood are generally not of the genuine variety in any society, other than those reputed to be dedicated to criminal or perverted ends. Well, I have this to say: no one knows but those who actually take part in the ceremony, whether it's chicken blood or human blood or pig blood or cow's blood. And as with the initiations of other societies, there is no doubt that the candidate may have been made to believe that he was actually going through an initiation which involved horrible things of this nature, such as human blood. Initiation into the ancient mysteries was often accompanied by the exposure of the candidate to fear and other emotions in order to make him receptive to the oath or message which was to be made manifest. It has been said, folks, that the European version of the Order of the Illuminati contributed in no small measure to the development of revolutionary doctrines which eventually culminated in the Russian and other communist machines. And in fact, for those of serious study who have perused the depths of the available material, as I and others have no doubt whatsoever, that communism, international socialism, is the direct product of the mystery schools of the Illuminati, as was the formation of this nation, which was guaranteed to lead us in to what is known as the New World Order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, the formation of a one-world totalitarian state ruled by benevolent despotism, is the way that they put it. And there is little doubt that the order was dedicated to the overcoming of princely power, as it was then known, and to the diffusion of anti-religious ideas. And this can best be seen by examining the development of the teachings of the member as he progressed from one degree of initiation into the next. Well, this knowledge included the fact that the Illuminati were proposing to destroy princes and prelates throughout the world, and were to remove forever the feeling of local nationality from the minds of men. Another goal was to destroy all existing religions. The ways in which this was to be done involved infiltrating high positions in education, administration of government, the military, and of course, the press. The very highest degrees showed that the rationalism and materialism of the thinkers who developed it were determined to stamp out all belief in religion, God, and any faith in a deity. The initiate was told were human inventions, and they had no meaning whatsoever. Now, this was developed further than the member who arrived at the highest position in the order or that designated as Rex or King, learns that he
fabricated text purporting to describe a Jewish plan for global domination.
showed that the rationalism and materialism of the thinkers who developed it were determined to stamp out all belief in religion, God, and any faith in a deity. The initiate was told were human inventions, and they had no meaning whatsoever. Now, this was developed further than the member who arrived at the highest position in the order, or that designated as Rex or King, learned that he was now the same as any king, on the same level, with the same rights and the same divine right rule, and that all men were capable of equal advancement. But all men were not equal. Hence, the need for kings over man was an illusion perpetrated by those in power, and this perpetration was to be broken at all costs. And the highest, or the man who sat at the head of the council of hidden supervisors, made up of 9 members, was designated as Rex Moonday, or literally translated, King of the World. In their machinations to overthrow, topple the kings and queens of all of the countries of the world from their thrones, they established the United States of America in the English colonies in the New World, and its ultimate goal, its secret destiny, was to be the catalyst to bring into the world what they called the Great Society or the New World Order. And it certainly worked, dear listeners. As you can look back through history, the granting of the common man of liberty, fraternity, equality, freedom that he had never tasted or known before in history lit the spark that then ignited the French Revolution, of course, with the leadership and the manipulation of the people of the Illuminati, the lodges of Freemasonry, the Ancient Order of the Rose and Cross, and others. The highest level were all the same, with the same goals. And this spark of revolution spread throughout the world. And until we all grow up and learn how to stop this, it will continue. As the secret societies propel us, manipulate us, deceive us, lie, operating in secret, infiltrating everything decent and good that man has ever built, destroying it from within, bringing closer and closer their goal of what they believe to be a utopia on earth, a one-world, totalitarian, socialist order. They hope to create the world where they will rule. As being the ones who possess the only truly mature minds, they will establish a council of advisors to a world charismatic political and religious leader who will be the outward rule. But he will really take his orders from this benevolent despotism, this the outward rule. But he will really take his orders from.
Sorry for the tech issues, folks. Donut, you there? Yo, what up? It's Donut. Where you at, man? Is that really you? You're not trolling me again, right? Okay, we're having some issues here. The fuck, dude? Man, this buffering's off the charts. My apologies, folks. And Donut as well. God, let's go, dude. I'm gonna have to change the let me see. Fuck.
This benevolent despotism, this council of learned elders.
Wow, this is terrible. Fucking awful, bro. All right, well, whether or not that's you, you're having issues clearly.
And everyone on the face of this earth will be under total control for every 24-hour period of their lives. There will be one world religion catering to the needs of man, not man obeying the laws of any god. The general rule will be, as has been touted many, many times by these people, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And even murder will be considered to be a learning experience, provided that the perpetrator actually learns something. People who exhibit violent tendencies as a matter of normal behavior on their part will simply be eliminated. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this is beginning to come together and make sense to you. If it doesn't, as yet, we have a long, long way to go, as you have probably already begun to understand.
Now we have to understand a few things about the order, the illumined ones, and the Vatican, which is a new thing, actually, the Vatican. But the Holy Roman Empire became what is the Catholic Church, and now in 1926, I believe, Vatican City was established. But the Pope has challenged world leaders by claiming that the people of the world already recognize the absolute authority of Rome because they observe the Sunday Sabbath that was ordered by the Pope in the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD. The original 10 Commandments given Moses by God ordered that we should remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, etc., so forth, right? This is the beginnings of the changes. Again, the Catholic Church is filled with paganism and ancient Druid and other cultures woven into it, all Luciferian, all connected to the order. The Pope has a lot of charisma, and in a one-world system, you need a religious head for power. Khomeini proved that. This Pope has enough following and charisma to make what we consider a great threat in this move. And that was about Pope John Paul II. And that was a quote from the Mantooth Report. Some of this information is coming from Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Did you know that the Los Angeles Times on December 12, 1984 quoted Pope John Paul II as saying, "Don't go to God for forgiveness of sins, come to me." Now this is blasphemy. And Pope Francis has done the same thing, repeating this mantra. You continue to sell a lie, make it simple, and keep repeating it, people believe it. And this is how we have been duped to believe a false history and a false narrative of the history of the world and those behind the scenes who control it. On July 21st, 1773, Pope Clement XIV forever annulled and extinguished the Jesuit order. France, Spain, and Portugal had independently come to realize that the Jesuits were meddling in affairs of state and were therefore enemies of the government. And indeed, the Jesuits are a big piece to the puzzle of the New World Order. The Pope's action was a response to pressure applied by the monarchies. King Joseph of Portugal signed a decree by which the Jesuits were denounced as traitors, rebels, and enemies to the realm. Pope Pius VII in August 1814, again, critical timing with a lot of the world events, reinstated the Jesuits to all their former rights and privileges. Ex-President John Adams wrote to his successor, Thomas Jefferson, quote, "I do not like the reappearance of the Jesuits. If there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth, it is this society." Jefferson replied, "Like you, I disapprove of the restoration of the Jesuits, for it means a step backwards from light into darkness. The Jesuits are still trouble today, as they have been throughout their existence." On February 28, 1982, Pope Paul II told Jesuits to keep clear of politics and honor Roman Catholic tradition. The U.S. News and World Report stated that the Jesuits had indeed meddled in the affairs of nations. The article stated, quote, "Jesuits have played leading roles in Nicaragua's Sandinista revolution." And guess what? Guess who's the Pope now? Pope Francis. Jorge Bergoglio, who was involved in a kidnapping scandal at the time. Oh, yes, that's right. And they were doing some shady shit. Oh, that's right. After all, the Jesuits are involved in intelligence and warfare. Revolution. Some Jesuits have joined the Communist Party, like Bergoglio, who is now the Pope. One priest in El Salvador has claimed that his order is working for the advancement of Marxism and revolution, not for God. Can't be sure who that is, that one priest, but wouldn't it be interesting if it was Bergoglio? Jesuits have joined left-wing rebel movements in Central America and the Philippines and have advocated a meddling of Marxism and Roman Catholicism in what is called liberation theology. When the United States wanted to employ the nastiest forms of the Haig-Kissinger depopulation policy in Central America, it was the Jesuits who organized and prodded the people into civil war. Wherever the Jesuits go, revolution quickly follows. I am always sad when I see or hear of people being hurt, but according to my research, the Jesuit priests murdered in Central America probably deserved it. And they did. And they did. The most powerful secret organization in the world is the Bilderberg Group, organized in 1952 and named after the hotel where its first meeting took place. The men who organized the Bilderberg Group, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, has the power to veto the Vatican's choice of any pope it selects. Pope Bernhard has this veto power because his family, the Habsburgs, are descended from the Roman emperors. Prince Bernhard is the leader of the Black families. He claims descendants from the House of David and thus can truly say that he is related to Jesus. Prince Bernhard, with the help of the CIA, brought the hidden ruling body of the Illuminati into public knowledge as the Bilderberg Group. This is the official alliance that makes up the world government body. The core of the organization is 3 committees made up of 13 members each, like the 13 colonies. There is a great relationship between the mysteries and the destiny, the secret destiny of America. A book should be read by Manly P. Hall called The Secret Destiny of America. The Bilderberg Group have 3 committees made up exclusively of members of all the different secret groups that make up the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Vatican, and the Black nobility. This committee works year-round in offices in Switzerland. It determines who is invited to the annual meeting and what policies and plans will be discussed. Notice how everything happens from Switzerland. You have the banking, the world banking cartel, that we just don't want to believe how deceived we are. We don't want to admit that we fail to understand this up until now. So a lot of it has to do with ego, which has been built up by society. Oh, you don't want your ego to be, you have to be part of the group. That's the other thing that's cunning. Because by me coming out with all this information that I've researched and finally had the courage to expose is what it is. The hypersexualization of society using sex and violence, sadism, It's reflected in art. It's reflected in fashion, quote unquote avant-garde. All of this cultural Marxism being promoted. Now, America is not and never was a Christian nation. It was founded on Judeo-Christian principles and ideology. Right and wrong is defined by the Ten Commandments. Now, people are offended by the Ten Commandments because it's got to do with a religion, Bible, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist, if you're of any faith. We have an obligation as humans, even for you humanists out there, you secular humanists, Luciferians or Gnostics, people that believe that we are going to evolve to God. In fact, this whole idea of making the Luciferian ideology and principle appealing and understanding. Listen, Lucifer's really been misunderstood. As I saw yesterday in a History Channel show regarding Lucifer, and it's unbelievable that they're pushing this out into the psyche of the public. In fact, in the 7 years that I've researched the New World Order and the connections to the secret societies, the information has spread like wildfire in these 7 years, and far more people are aware. So much so that the History Channel, and which I should call the History Disinformation Channel, and let us not forget who produces the show Ancient Aliens and all of these disinformation propaganda pieces. A company called Prometheus Entertainment. Well, Prometheus, for those that are not in the know, was a Greek god who gave the knowledge of fire to humanity to help humanity. So Lucifer is a helpful thing because Lucifer is Prometheus. And he has helped us by giving us knowledge, and we should be thankful. And God is really the wicked and evil one, the God of Abraham. This is what they believe, and they're making their case daily on mainstream media propaganda circuits in every aspect of our society, as I mentioned. Remember, Prometheus. Prometheus is in the Rockefeller Center. It's all part of the order. It's all part of this quest, the order of the quest. And they're promoting it in every way they can at the Super Bowl, in films, in fashion, in art, in music. The illuminated ones are working diligently to defile all that is moral and holy. And they're doing a great job. Most don't realize this is happening. Most don't see the gradual decline of morality and the absolution of sin. We see it in our politicians. They're criminals. We see it in business people, the greed of Wall Street. We see it all around us. The New World Order abounds. It's everywhere. And what it is this allowance for conditions to create chaos. That's simply what it is. The fact is, the rise in violence and crime is directly related to this moral decline. Greed and all the 7 deadly sins, all of them. Now, whether you practice a religion or not, as I said, these moral codes of behavior, like the 10 Commandments and the 7 deadly sins, make for a civilized society. But those who wish to enslave us in the New World Order want us to do as we wish. They want us to be our every whim satisfied. The goal is to keep us distracted, amused, so that no one pays too close attention to what's going on behind the scenes, as our rights are being stripped and our wealth being stolen. And those who profess to be for the middle class and the poor are implementing programs that increase poverty and diminish the middle class. We must understand that many of the institutions and much of the pop culture that we are exposed to through the mass media, through fashion, through all forms of promotion, have brought us to where we are today, from where it was a very church-going crowd 100 years ago to a very hedonistic crowd today. This is not by accident. In fact, in their writings, they have worked for this. They have worked for this end, to bring about immorality, to bring about a standardization of what is considered normal. In other words, things that would be considered taboo or considered antisocial have been socialized. Everything has been socialized. And we must understand this. We must see it. We must recognize it. And we must realize that it is these forces emanating from the secret societies responsible for this. That's why their symbols are everywhere. They're Freemasonic symbols in cinema. The Freemasonic symbols that are pervasive in our society. They're everywhere. And there's a reason, because they speak in signs and symbols to one another, the adepts, and they must be stopped. If we are to retain what we call freedom, we must understand that they are using our liberty and our attempts to have fairness, okay, against us, enslaving us with the very things we seek to attain. It's very, very crafty and cunning, this deception. And I pray that you begin to open your eyes and see what it is I'm talking about here, because it's very real and it influences our society. They put you in a group: Republican, Democrat, women's lib, the traditional woman's role, racism, white, black, religion, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Everybody pitting against it. The Christian faith is sliced up so badly. There's thousands of different sects of it. All this infighting, designed to keep us fighting with one another, while they rape and pillage our economy, take away our property rights, and institute steadily, slowly, and incrementally the 10 planks of the Illuminati manifesto, which is the 10 planks of communism. Because communism is a creation of the Illuminati, as you are learning. And if you haven't figured this out yet, or you don't believe it, you're not paying attention. You don't want to believe it. I don't blame you. I didn't want to believe it. You know how hard it was for me to not only come to terms with this, but to have the courage to have myself ostracized by everybody that I know, thinking that I'm a nut. Having my own friends that I've known for my whole life, you know, take an exit from our relationship because I'm a wacko. I'm a conspiracy nut. Because they, and anyone that doesn't understand this, are in denial of the reality. It's so horrible that you want to believe that belief system is so strong. The cognitive dissonance is so strong. I mean, everything I could possibly do, I'm doing to get this information out in my ability. At the cost of many friendships. But if you know what, I've gained many friendships too, of people that know what's going on, that are awake, that see what's happening. I mean, this isn't like some sort of a fantasy or a conspiracy theory. It is an agenda that is in motion, that is working now. The New World Order is a present tense, as much as it is past tense, as much as future. And only we can stop it by understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, and who they are. Every proposal or plan that has ever been discussed in an annual meeting of the Bilderberg Group has come to pass, usually within 2 or 3 years following the meeting. The Bilderberg Group is directing the quiet war that is being waged against us. How can they do it? These are the men who really rule the world. The numbers 3, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 39, and any multiple of these numbers, have a special meaning to the Illuminati. Notice that the Bilderberg Group has a core of 39 members who are broken up into 3 groups of 13 members in each group. Notice that the core of 39 answers to the 13 who make up the policy committee. Take special notice that the 13 members of the policy committee answer to the round table of 9. You know that the original number of states of the United States is 13. The Constitution has 7 articles and was signed by 39 members of the Constitutional Convention. The United States was born on July 4th, 1776. July is the 7th month of the year. Add 7 for July and 4 and you have 11. 1776 equals 21 when added together, which is a multiple of 3 and 7. Add 2 plus 1 and you get 3. Look at the numbers in 1776 and you see 2 7s and a 6, which is a multiple of 3. Coincidence, you say? No. No. Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Mason, and the most renowned expert on these subjects, wrote in his book, The Secret Destiny of America, quote, "For more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. All have continued, and they still exist as the order of the quest. Men bound by a secret oath to labor in the cause of world democracy decided that the American colonies they would plan would be the roots of a new way of life. The order of the quest was set up in America before the middle of the 17th century. Franklin spoke for the order of the quest, and most of the men who worked with him in the early days of the American Republic were also members. Not only were they the founders of the United States government, and they were Masons, but they received aid from a secret and august body existing in Europe, which helped them establish this country for a particular purpose known only to the initiated few. We know France helped us, but it's much deeper than that. It's the Freemasons and the secret societies. These quotes can be found on page 133 of Secret Destiny of America. And interesting, when you add together 1, 3, and 3 equal the number 7. Another coincidence? I think not. We can get a little insight into the order of the quest from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace, the man directly responsible for printing the reverse of the seal of the United States on the $1 bill. Mr. Wallace, a member of the Order of the Quest, wrote in a letter to the Russian mystic and artist Nicholas Roersch, quote, "The search, whether it be for the lost word of masonry or the holy chalice or the potentialities of the age to come, it is one supremely worthwhile objective. All else is karmic duty, but surely everyone is a potential Galahad. So may we strive for the chalice and the flame above it. The Holy Grail has a way of popping up on a regular basis in the writings of secret societies, ladies and gentlemen, over and over again. In the Great Seal of the United States, we see the ancient symbol of the Brotherhood of the Snake, which you already know is the all-seeing eye in the pyramid, representing Lucifer in the form of wisdom. Just below the pyramid, you will notice Novus Ordo Seclorum, which translates into a New World Order. There are 9 tail feathers on the eagle, 13 leaves in the olive branches, 13 bars and stripes, 13 arrows, 13 letters in E pluribus unum, 13 stars in the green crest above, 13 stones in the pyramid, and 13 letters in the words Annuit Coeptus. 13 is the mystical number assigned to Satan, according to Stan Deo in his excellent book titled CoNsPiRaCy. Links to all of the books and information that I'm giving to you, ladies and gentlemen, can be found on my website, howardnema.com. Let's continue. So the Roman Empire, the actual Caesar, okay, the Pope is the Caesar. And of course, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, which has incredible significance to the Illuminati. And they're pagans. And they practice the mystery religions. They worship Baal and Molech and perform evil rituals. And finally, it's out in the open. But you're being anti-Catholic if you talk about the priests. Yeah, it's still not bad religion. Well, what did it do, the religion? It broke the commandments, saying, first of all, it says the Pope is basically God. Come to him. Same thing they said with don't go to Jesus, go to him. John Paul II said the same thing. They're false prophets, whatever you want to call them. But they're not working for the betterment of humanity. They're working for the installation of the New World Order. And it has nothing to do with Jesus.
That if you are going to control any population for any length of time, you must have some measure of consent. It's exceedingly difficult to see how pure terrorism can function indefinitely. It can function for a fairly long time, but I think sooner or later you have to bring in an element of persuasion, an element of getting people to consent to what is happening to them. Well, it seems to me that the nature of the ultimate revolution with which we are now faced is precisely this, that we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy, who have always existed and presumably always will exist, to get people actually to love their servitude. This seems to me the ultimate in malevolent revolution, shall we say. And this is a problem which has interested me for many years, and about which I wrote 30 years ago a fable, The Brave New World, which is essentially the account of a society making use of all the devices at that time available, and some of the devices which I imagined to be possible, making use of them in order to, first of all, to standardize the population, to iron out inconvenient human differences, to create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system. And since then, I have continued to be extremely interested in this problem, and I have noticed with increasing dismay that a number of the predictions which were purely fantastic when I made them 30 years ago have come true or seem in process of coming true, that a number of techniques about which I talked seem to be here already, and that there seems to be a general movement in the direction of this kind of ultimate revolution, this method of control by which people can be made to enjoy a state of affairs which, by any decent standard, they ought not to enjoy. The enjoyment of servitude.
We have to understand the things that are happening today in the world are planned. FDR said it himself. When things happen, you better believe they've been planned that way. There are no accidents. There are no coincidences. And that includes Pearl Harbor. We had intelligence. We knew about it. We allowed it to happen, so it got us. It was a pretext for us to get into war. Believe it or not, like it or not, if it goes against everything that you ever think of as American and insults you and makes your stomach rot, guess what? So it makes my stomach rot too. We have a criminal government that has destroyed lives, killed, murdered, and maimed for this New World Order. While we submit to a system designed to enslave us by an elite group of psychopaths, there are more than 30 million people, mostly in the Muslim world, who are forced into physical and sexual slavery. Let's sound a voice for those whose voices cannot be heard. I implore you all to research the topics I discussed today. Find your own truth. There is only one truth. Seek and you'll find it. Please share this presentation widely. Subscribe to Truth Talk News on YouTube and check out howardnema.com.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. A great time to end at 3 hours and 56 minutes, like how the Society of Jesus equals 56 in Gematria. And the word 3 written out as a word also equals 56. So much love to y'all. Peace and blessings. Peace, prosperity, and pineal power, as I always say. I am pineal power. Fuck the New World Order. Much love.